I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, very good morning to you. Happy New Year's Eve. Yes, David Bull here. This is Morning Glory. A very good morning to you. So many messages coming in already. Quintin Young, thank you so much for your lovely message. Happy New Year, David. Have a good one. May all your mornings in 2025 be glorious. Very kind of you. Also, thank you for all your Christmas cards as well. Yvonne and Gary Mackison in Tingley in Wakefield. Very kind of you to send that in. And also this one from Jules in Bristol saying, Feliz Navidad. Now, I had a big discussion with Ted, the producer, this morning about whether I was allowed to wear a Christmas waistcoat. I was told categorically, Christmas is over. Bar humbug. Absolute nonsense. We shall see about that. Still got it ready, though. Right, joining me this morning, everyone's favourite copper, Peter Blexley. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. David. How are you?
I'm very well, actually, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Nice Christmas?
Oh, my bird was deliciously moist on Christmas Day.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, and yeah, the day just improved from there on, really.
Did it?
Yeah.
Did it? And who cooked?
My friend.
Right.
Yeah, we went to friends.
So you had a couple of sherries?
Oh, yes, most definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Although I paced myself.
Did you?
Yeah, I did Christmas, but and I enjoyed it all the more for it, to be honest.
Now,
with you.
did you... I remember you saying that you were going to meet up with all the kids or something. Is that right?
No.
Is that later?
Our young adults are travelling the world.
Yes.
So on Christmas Day, for the first time ever, my wife and I woke up to an empty house. No kids
And how
whatsoever.
was she? Because you said she was actually going to be very worried about that.
Well, I bought her some rather nice theatre tickets for Christmas, which cheered her up immensely.
Very good.
And then we went to our friends for Christmas dinner, joined their family. We had a fabulous time.
Lovely, lovely. I've told people what happened. I left here on Christmas Eve, got home, the heating had broken, then my water hosed through the ceiling, and then the dog ate the cheese.
Oh,
it went really well.
Did you get your boiler fixed?
No, I couldn't get it done until after Christmas. So, but I was lucky because I could light a log fire, and that's and that's the joy of living in the countryside.
Okay.
But you know, Christmas behind us, we're looking forward to the new year, and of course, front page this morning, pretty much in not every paper, but lots of paper. This is the Daily Telegraph, also the Daily Mail. We're talking about the New Year's honours list. I have very mixed feelings about the New Year's honours list, but the headline this morning, this is the Daily Telegraph. PM knights Khan in a reward for failure. Yes, you heard that right. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been knighted in Sir Keir Starmer's first New Year's honours list. Let's just look at his track record, shall we? So the congestion charge, the Ulez, spiralling knife crime. Why is he be honoured?
Unlike you, David, I don't live in a countryside. I live in a London suburb.
Yes.
I've lived in London boroughs all my life. And since Khan's election to the role of mayor, way back in 2016, I've seen this city nosedive. Nosedive in terms of rising crime, unsolved crime. The Metropolitan Police, of course, remain in what's called engage, otherwise known as special measures. The standard of behaviour on our tubes, our buses, our trains is so appalling that women are harassed on a very, very frequent basis. The streets are... there are so many homeless people on our streets, which is unfortunate for them, and I'll say unsightly for others to have to navigate their way around. And quite frankly, London is not the city it was. How on earth he can get a knighthood is frankly beyond me.
Well, you're right. Knife crime has increased by more than 50%. Violent crime soaring, despite a 71% increase in the portion of council tax, of course, that Londoners pay to City Hall. There's a housing crisis. We've seen, obviously, Ulez as well. The other thing that drives me potty being in London is those 20-mile-an-hour zones. And, of course, the way that traffic has actually become more congested under Sadiq Khan. I honestly don't know who he is working for, apart from himself.
Oh, he's waged war on the motorists. I mean, ever since he came in. And now, quite frankly, it's almost an impossibility to drive in London, not only because you will crawl anywhere at a snail's pace, but the expense of it all, with Ulez, congestion charging and the such like. So I always use the alternative, which is public transport, and, just to reiterate what I said a few moments ago, I see that nosediving. Yesterday, I posted a picture. I was on the Bakerloo line at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there is somebody in filthy clothes, prone, asleep across 4 or 5 seats.
Just not acceptable.
And yet Khan says every journey matters on the London Underground and on the buses and all of that. You could have fooled me. London has simply got more dangerous. Don't get your phone out because somebody will nick it. Don't wear a nice watch because somebody will rob you of that. London's got increasingly dangerous. The police have got increasingly ineffective. The streets are dirty, littered, filthy, and so many people are being turned off coming to London. And he gets a knighthood. It is utterly ludicrous.
And the Daily Mail reiterates exactly your sentiment. Prime Minister's reward for failure. Sadiq Khan is knighted. Of course, this is 3 weeks before the inauguration of Donald Trump. There's a spat, of course, between the two of them. Sadiq said it was un-British to host a state visit for the incoming president of the United States. Also, let me just remind you of that time that Sadiq Khan described protesters rallying against that Ulez, the ultra-low emission zone expansion. He called them far-right, COVID deniers and Tories. Let's take a look.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group. Let's be frank. Let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far-right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers, and some are Tories.
He is so divisive.
Oh, he really is. And, of course, he relies heavily on the block brown vote in London. And they've elected him 3 times, astonishingly, ludicrously, foolishly, I would venture to suggest. he knows his audience, he knows how to get voted in, he knows exactly what to say, because, of course, London has swathes of this city, not only the inner parts of it, but the suburbs, that are almost full exclusively of brown and black faces. That's how it is. That's a fact. That's not racist. There are areas that are predominantly, no, overwhelmingly.
And why do they vote for him?
Because he's a brown-faced man and he will criticise anything that is perceived to be right of centre, slightly right of centre, anything that kind of represents the man who drives a van for a living, needs to get into London to earn a shilling or three, and is in any way, shape or form not basically part of the lunatic left.
I mean, it certainly seems that he panders to those minority groups. He knows, as you say, exactly where his vote is. It seems the vast majority of Londoners are ignored. And as you rightly say, he has been rewarded for failure. What does it say about the wider award system? Or I'm thinking about people like Emily Thornberry. You remember when she had a go at someone hanging out a St George's flag out of their house and essentially implying that was racist?
But there's just one thing I need to say before we move on to Thornberry, if I may.
Yeah.
When you say minority groups, in many parts of London, they are the overwhelmingly dominant group, and they are not minorities in any way, shape or form, and Khan knows that.
Oh, he certainly does.
Block votes, and those are who he appeals to, and that is largely why he's been elected, sadly, 3 times. But moving on to Emily Thornberry.
Yeah, let's talk about Thornberry. Of course, she is a veteran left-wing politician. She was a former shadow attorney general, a Corbyn loyalist, of course. She called Trump a racist, sexist predator. Now, it was in Rochester where she posted that picture of the St George's flag. There was a white van outside, and she said, and the caption was, "Image from Rochester." It was rude, belittling, and actually it was, frankly, also inflammatory.
Yeah, I wonder if she'd ever ventured down to Cornwall, where many, many people proudly display the Cornish flag in their front gardens on flagpoles. You can see it wherever you go throughout Cornwall. And I say to proud Cornish people, you show your flag. You raise that flag to the top of the flagpole and be proud of where you live and your culture. Would Thornberry go down there and start berating people like that? But no, you see, because they are so rampantly left, and because in their world any kind of allegiance to your nation, to be proud, to say you're British, to wear a Union flag, to wear an England flag, whether that be on a waistcoat, on a tie or something, and I suspect you've probably got a Union Jack waistcoat.
I might have.
Amongst your huge collection, Dr. David.
I've got St George's tie.
There you go, and I've got a Union flag tie, and I wear that as and when I choose to. But any kind of allegiance like that is seen by the rabid left as being inherently racist, because they just don't get the simple fact that people would like to be proud of where they come from, their heritage, their history. Cuts across another story a day about the national curriculum, and they can't handle it.
Can I just ask you generally, so lots of other politicians have made the list as well, apart from Emily Thornberry. Also, we've seen Andy Street, the Conservative Mayor, a former Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands, Sir Nick Gibb, the former Education Minister, Patricia Hewitt is in there as well. On top of that, you've also got people who are rewarded for broadcasting, for example. Alan Titchmarsh has got a CBE. I'm not quite sure about that. This is Services to Horticulture. You've also got Stephen Fry. This is one of the big names, 67, the host of QI, star of shows like Jeeves and Wooster. Crikey, that was a long time ago. He was knighted, and this is much more of a reason for me, for services to mental health awareness, the environment and charity. Just in terms of the award system, is it out of control? It seems to me that obviously these are at the bequest of the government, they are submitted to the King, but, you know, it's jobs for the boys and girls, isn't it, a lot of this?
It is, to a certain extent, but I'd like to highlight some of the awards that are given out that really raise my soul and make me think perhaps this system does have some merit. Michaela Beams, she's 18 and she comes from Wantage in Oxfordshire. OK, now this young woman was diagnosed with cancer when she was 4 years old.
I know.
And she's now 18. And for 14 years, she has campaigned and raised, get this, £350,000.
It's amazing.
What a wonderful young lady she is. And she, of course, has been given a British Empire Medal.
And rightly
Michaela,
so.
You make me proud to be British, young lady. And so many other people, like Wendy Tarpley-Morris, who founded what's called the Little Princess Trust, and they provide wigs to children suffering cancer treatment who lose their hair. These are the stories I want to hear about. These are the British heroes, including, and I'll stop after this one because I'm sure you want me to, but a music teacher, Nathaniel Dye, he's 39. He's been given an MBE because he raised £37,000 for Macmillan, that wonderful charity that supports people with cancer, since he was terminally diagnosed in 2023. And he's already raised £37,000. Nathaniel, you enjoy that MBE.
Absolutely, well said. I think this is where the award system does come into its own, actually. There's some other quite notable ones in here as well. Of course, those people campaigning in the Horizon scandal, the post office scandal, and rightly so, they've been given awards. Seema Misra, she says, of course, she was handed a 15-month prison sentence in 2010, 6 counts of false accounting. She was not guilty of that. She has been given an OBE in the New Year's honours list. Also, Bill Wright recognised for his work on the infected blood scandal, a really important cause as well. Just one quick one. I just want to ask you before I turn to the question I want to ask people this morning. The boss of Network Rail has been knighted. I mean, this obviously is an infrastructure operator. It has been beset with problems. It is moving into this Great British Railways, which is this great idea of the current government. And of course, all we've seen is delays, poor service. We've seen fatalities on there. Train delays since he joined Network Rail in 2018 have risen from 9.2 million minutes to 15.2 million minutes per year.
And these are the kind of awards that make me scratch my head and go, what is it all about? They stand in such stark contrast to those wonderful people I was speaking about just a minute or two ago. It seems like this element of these gongs, these knighthoods, very much are jobs for the boys. Establishment rewarding the establishment.
Yeah. There's some interesting ones as well. Sir Kezio Ishiguro is made a Companion of Honour, a select group limited to 65 people. That sounds a good one to have. I'll talk more about these and also which kind of awards, what means what. And there's a sort of list, a hierarchical list of those awards. Let's take a voice note now. Keep all your messages coming in, please. 0344 499 1000. Voice notes, you can leave a message, you can text, you can tweet, you can do all sorts. This is James talking about Keir Starmer bestowing an award on Sadiq Khan.
My New Year's wish is for once Starmer goes on one of his so-called trips again, hopefully the man stays there. Absolute disgrace he is. And the fact that now he's gave Sadiq Khan and Gareth Southgate both sirs for failing. My God. Anyway, both have a great day. Cheers, David.
Thanks ever so much, James. Keep all of those messages coming in. That got me thinking this morning, just in terms of all of these awards and this big headline, Prime Minister's reward for failure, Sadiq Khan knighted, the front page of the Telegraph as well. Prime Minister knights Khan in reward for failure. Your thoughts when you wake up this morning and you see that Sadiq Khan has been given an award for slowing down the traffic, for imposing Ulez, for spiralling rates of knife crime, as Peter rightly mentioned. Do you feel insulted that this man has actually been given a knighthood? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. After the break, we'll go through more of this morning's top stories. Don't go anywhere. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
this is petty, Sam. This, at the end of the day, this isn't just the richest man in the world, now quickly becoming one of the most powerful men in the world, not just because of his connections to Trump and the incoming administration in America, but he controls all the satellites in space, basically. I kind of think you just don't want to mess with him. I don't think he's a malign character. I don't think he's nefarious. I think he does want to engage. But shutting him out, I mean, it might be the right of a government to say, we don't like your politics and your attitude, so we won't do business with you. But grow up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Happy New Year's Eve. David Bull here. This is Morning Glory. I'm joined by Peter Blexley this morning, former Metropolitan Police detective, keeping me on the straight and narrow this morning. Happy New Year, David and Peter, says Steve. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Morgs, also Happy New Year to you. Ainsley, good morning. You ray of sunshine. I'm sitting here with my cuppa and waiting for you to start. Well, thanks ever so much for all of that. I'm asking this morning, just in terms of Sadiq Khan being given a knighthood, do you feel insulted by that? What are your thoughts this morning as you wake up? That number 0344 499 1000. David, this is Jason in Worthing. Good morning to you. Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood is Keir Starmer putting two fingers up at the country. He's basically saying, we'll do what we want. There is nothing you can do about it. If you look at the people who've been knighted, then it's not a list that any normal person would want to be part of. The knighthood system should be for people who've been selfless, who've acted for the community, not fit people who are meant to be doing their job. It is cronyism, it's nepotism at its finest. That's Jason in Worthing. Thanks for that. Sharon Miller, good morning to you. Why has this pathetic man Khan got a knighthood? This is ridiculous. This man is useless. Should we, the people, vote for who we want to be on the New Year's honours list? That's Sharon in Staffordshire. Of course, no system is ever going to be 100% foolproof, but it's an interesting idea. But also, of course, you can nominate people for awards. I think it's quite a murky and complicated system to do so, but you can do it, your community can do it. Keep all those messages coming in. How does it make you feel, Keir Starmer giving a knighthood to Sadiq Khan? Let's take you through this morning's front pages now. Let's start with the Daily Telegraph, and of course this is the article we've been talking about this morning. Prime Minister knights Khan in reward for failure. As we were saying, knife crime over his tenure has increased more than 50%. Violent crime has soared, despite a 71% increase in the portion of council tax that Londoners pay to City Hall. There has been this huge petition as well, more than 200,000 signatures saying he doesn't deserve his knighthood. Also, we've seen rises in council tax, we've seen the introduction of Ulez. As Peter said, we've seen standards on the underground diminish as well, 20-mile-an-hour zones coming in. Does he deserve a knighthood? The Daily Mail also this morning says PM's reward for failure as Sadiq Khan is knighted. London Mayoral risks overshadowing New Year's honours. Of course, he's the man responsible for the celebrations in London tonight, Peter.
Show me a Londoner who thinks that our capital city has improved since 2016, and I'll show you somebody who's taking too many drugs.
Thanks. The front page of the Eye this morning, post office scandal victims are given honours. These are also in the honours. I talked about Seema Misra. 4 former sub-postmasters who helped expose the Post Office Horizon IT scandal have been made OBEs in recognition of their services to justice after 2 decades of fighting. That being said, of course, it's worth remembering that many campaigners are still waiting for compensation despite being cleared of criminal wrongdoing, and more than 900 sub-postmasters wrongly convicted of criminal offences, as we know, due to the faulty Post Office IT system known as Horizon. The front page of the Daily Mirror this morning, New Year's honours list on here: Stephen Fry, Sarah Lancashire, Anne Reid, Alan Titchmarsh, And it says, just very simply, Sir Gareth, former England manager Gareth Southgate, who led the team to July's Euro 2024 final, is to be knighted in the New Year's honours list. And as I said, he joins all of those other names. Just interesting. Your thoughts on that as well, please. Front page of the Daily Express. We're going to talk about this in some detail in just a moment, but the headline is, spectacular mistake to open borders. Tony Blair threw open the UK borders to millions of migrants to boost the economy, despite his ministers advising him against it. You may remember this. This is in 2004. He basically granted Eastern Europeans unrestricted access to the British labour markets. Now, there was pushback from various people like Jack Straw, John Prescott, saying, hang on a minute, we shouldn't open the borders. Generally, we need to have some sort of transition period. Blair overrode that on the advice of David Blunkett, and we'll talk more about that. That story, by the way, is also front page of the Financial Times, their headline. Blair was urged to delay free movement from EU that fired immigration anger. The Times, this is quite an interesting story this morning. Completely different story. Public sector plan to trade pensions for higher pay. We've spoken a great deal about the public sector and being given inflation-busting pay rises, and of course they've got these gold-plated pensions. But the story this morning is that millions of teachers, nurses and civil servants could be offered higher salaries in return for lower pensions under plans being considered to retain staff and avoid further pay disputes. Now, that's quite an interesting story for lots of reasons. One is that actually the cost of those gold-plated pensions will be absolutely enormous over the next few years. Unions themselves split, some describing the plans as dangerous. It's an interesting thought, Peter.
It's a trap. Let me tell you that.
Go on.
And I would say
A trap to who?
To public service employees. If, for example...
Well, they want to reduce the pension, don't they?
Say, for example, you're a firefighter, you're a paramedic, you're a police officer, and you work on the front line, then in all likelihood, you're a hero. You run to danger when people run away from it. And you know what? You're not very well paid either.
No, you're not.
OK? You're never going to get rich. If you go into public service and you operate in roles such as that, I always say to people, you won't get rich and you won't be popular. But there's a bonus to be had. If, at the end of your service, and you run full term, you do the years required to get your maximum pension, the compensation that you will receive is that you will have a decent pension. Once again, you won't be a millionaire.
No.
All right, some of those who join the civil service get their knighthoods.
Well, I was about to throw the civil service at you. So you're talking about police officers, firefighters. I totally agree about that. But what about the civil servants who are well paid?
And lower grade civil servants.
Yeah.
Those who work in kind of administration roles, you know, that might suit them with a family life, women returning to work who are never going to climb that greasy pole of promotion, but work very conscientiously. And there are some of those out there, OK? Those kind of people, once again, they're not going to get rich. Don't conflate those people that actually do the work, that actually sit at those desks or work on the front line and get the graft done. Please do not confuse or conflate them with those greasy pole climbers who end up with their knighthoods, their massive salaries and their huge pensions. So I go back to what I was saying. It's a trap. If you're going to be a frontline public sector worker, do not fall for this. Higher wages now for a lower pension later, because believe you me, the decades will fly by just like that. And when you get to retirement age, you will be so grateful that you have a reasonable pension to help you through your later years. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. Contact your union. Say no, no, no to this.
Thank you, Peter. That's the front page of the Times. The front page of the Guardian this morning. NHS raises alarm over dangerous hospital sites. We've talked about this story as well. This is not a new story. Hospital buildings in England are in such a dilapidated state they risk fires, floods, electrical faults. This is according to internal NHS Trust documents. Leaders are saying conditions have become outright dangerous. Now, Matthew Taylor, who is the chief executive of the NHS Confederation, saying that some parts of the estate are so run down that patients are being being treated in unsafe and sometimes outright dangerous facilities, which I agree with. He pins the blame on decades of underinvestment in the capital infrastructure. Now, that is not to say it is the same as a lack of money coming into the health service, but this, again, is a huge story because it's an increasingly ageing capital infrastructure that we've got. The NHS was never designed to do what it's doing. Many doctors and nurses and clinicians are working in completely outdated buildings. I've seen it myself, where the heating doesn't work, the aircon doesn't work, the boilers don't work, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
This is the short-termism of our politics, unfortunately, and this is driven by people who are politically ambitious, fiercely ambitious. Your likes of your Starmers, your Sunaks, your Blairs, all these people, they are so fiercely politically ambitious that they only see as far as the next general election, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And because we don't have consensus politics in any way, shape or form, we have this unedifying PMQs, we have a pathetic political system where people are forever trying to score points, rather than some kind of broader, grown-up, mature, for the benefit of the nation, coalition type of agreement where everybody goes, what are we going to do so that everything is fit for purpose in 10, 20, 30 years' time? There's none of that.
No, I'd agree.
Short-termism.
But, I mean, there's a big argument. I've said this for a long time. The NHS needs to be depoliticised. The whole thing needs to be taken out. So you have a 20, 30, 40-year strategic plan.
Here. I completely agree. And we're talking about what is good for the nation, not only the NHS, but let's look at the military, let's look at our roads, let's look at policing. Let's have long-term, objective strategies that are going to make things fit for purpose and make this nation something to be proud of once again, including, of course, because it's not an elephant in this room, immigration. Let's look at that. This story about Blair. Yeah. Blair opened the floodgates because he knew all those people that were going to come into the UK would end up voting for, guess who?
Him.
It was politics.
Of course it was.
He was playing politics. So many people that I knew at the time were tradespeople, chippies, sparks, plumbers and all of that. And to see them suddenly get undercut and struggle to get work was annoying at best.
And we'll talk about that. We're talking about those 8 countries, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, all coming in 2004. We'll talk more about that after this break. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Sadiq Khan gets a knighthood. Your thoughts on that? Does that stick in your throat this morning on this New Year's Eve? Just very quickly, one quick message. Christina in Spain, good morning to you. Good morning, David and Peter. By the way, David, Christmas starts on December the 24th. This is what I was trying to tell Ted, and finishes on the 6th of January, Ted. 24th until the 6th. So I, for one, would have loved your matching ties and waistcoats. I may change for you. Khan should never have been awarded a knighthood. He's ruined the most wonderful city in the world. And why has Southgate been knighted for coming second? Great show, David. After the break, we'll take you through the rest of this morning's front pages. Don't go anywhere. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 6:37 Morning Glory. I'm David Bull in for Mike Graham. Thanks ever so much for your company. New Year's Eve, are you ready? Are you all prepared? Do you know what you're doing tonight? Do you know what you're wearing? Keep an eye on the weather as well. I think here in London they're looking at the weather. I know Hogmanay has been cancelled in Scotland. Here in London they're looking at the weather and making some sort of final judgment on what will or will not go ahead. So make sure you check the latest headlines. If we hear anything on that, of course, I will bring it to you. We're in the middle of going through this morning's front pages. Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective, joins me this morning. We'll just finish these. The Sun front page. This is one for you, really, Peter. Now we want justice for our Liam. This is Liam Payne, of course. A judge in Argentina, said 2 hotel staff sold the One Direction star cocaine. A pal, a waiter, and the manager showed neglect by leaving him alone and vulnerable. He died, as we know, from falling from a balcony. Now, this is going to obviously be a big sentence for them because they're complicit.
It's a very, very sad story.
It is.
And, of course, these are only charges, so no one has been convicted yet.
No.
And whilst it's in a jurisdiction many thousands of miles away, I'm still going to be a little bit responsible around what I say.
Yeah.
These are very different charges to those that would be brought in England.
Yeah, so they've been charged with negligent homicide, which is apparently their equivalent of manslaughter.
Yes, but it does have a twist to it, the negligence bit in particular. And also, with 2 of them have been charged with historic supplying of drugs to Liam, and that virtually never happens over here in the UK. Almost.
Is that right?
In fact, yeah, I can barely think of a case where that has happened. I think if we had had it in the past, in similar kind of tragic cases, it might have served as some kind of deterrent to people. But of course, the sad thing is the big headline beyond the tragedy of Liam losing his life is that the illegal drugs industry is the 4th biggest industry in the world. It's bigger than the textile industry. And of course we're all sat here today wearing clothes and people have curtains and all that kind of stuff. It's an enormous business and it is left entirely in the hands of criminals, which is of course a folly and a nonsense. And so until we radically reform our drug laws, sadly and tragically, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, I'm very much on the same page as you. Let's move finally to the Daily Star front page this morning. Eggheads, great news if you're an egghead. Eggheads, we've cracked baldness. Apparently eggheads have got some great news for slapheads, as they're calling them. That's a bit rude, isn't it? Slapheads, eating eggs can apparently stop you going bald. The full story on page 9. So looking at this, apparently this is according to Dr. Emma Patel, who is a renowned nutritionist. She said eggs are a powerhouse food for hair health. They're packed with biotin, the protein that makes up our tresses, as it says. People who eat eggs 3 times a week had stronger, less brittle hair, experienced fewer hair shedding episode over a period of 2 months. I don't buy it.
By way of being the exception that may prove the rule, I've eaten eggs by the dozen all my life.
Right.
I love eggs. I'll be going home.
Well, you've got a great head of hair, Peter.
No, I haven't. If I turn around, you'll see the hollow, sad truth about it. I'm completely bald on top, and so I disprove that theory completely.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any truth in that at all. Let's move on, shall we? This is the Telegraph this morning. Blair opened the borders despite the warnings over the East European migrant influx. So this, again, I think comes to the nub of the problem that we're still facing, which was Tony Blair was urged not to open Britain's borders to thousands of Eastern European migrants. And he essentially was warned by people like John Prescott, by Jack Straw, saying you need to be really careful. This was in 2004 with the accession of 8 countries, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia. Many other countries had transition periods, so they said you can come in based on or predicated on various factors. What Blair did, he was lent on by Blunkett, and essentially he opened the gates and we saw what happened.
And many, many people had their kitchens fitted by Polish men.
They did, and they're very good workers.
Well, some of them are.
Some of them
Although I knew somebody who was particularly wealthy and rather stingy at the same time. And so they engaged Polish workers to put in their kitchen, and they did a really shabby job of it.
Did they?
And 18 months later, it was fit for being ripped out all over again, and that made me chuckle. But, of course, on a very serious note, it did undermine, correction, Blexley, the wages of so many tradespeople over here.
100%.
Who were previously working for a decent amount, which gave them a reasonable living. They could pay their mortgage, go on holiday, have a car on the driveway, all those kind of things which people would want and like. And then suddenly they were being undercut because so many of these migrant workers that came in didn't bring their families, so they were living 6 to a room, 8 to a room, paying the rent between them, sending millions upon millions of pounds back to their home countries. And many, in fairness, some did return, because they made so much money over here, they then returned to their home nations as wealthy people.
Yeah.
Because they built homes and all that kind of stuff. But the cost of it was catastrophic to the tradespeople of this country. And why have we not got so many tradespeople now?
Yeah.
We can rewind to this, because they saw their fathers being undermined as tradespeople.
So when you look at the numbers, they predicted you get about 13,000 people coming to this country. They were woefully wrong in that. Many more came in, 87,000 or thereabouts initially. Just in terms of that, though, I think this was the beginning of the movement for Brexit, because this is where people said, hang on a minute, you just can't have people coming here from all over Europe, undercutting, undermining our tradespeople in this country. There's no sovereignty left of this United Kingdom. And actually, I think this was the beginnings of Brexit.
I think that's a really interesting observation. And in furtherance, I would say, it also shows the disconnect which exists, so irritatingly so, between the political classes and the rest of us. Because, for me, I really value a quality tradesperson, whether they're a chippy, a sparks, a plasterer, a tiler, a roofer, and the list goes on. They are really skilled people who do very important work. And the minute they all started to be undermined by this mass influx of foreign labour, then youngsters didn't look up to them, didn't admire them as much, and consequently didn't pursue Dad's role in going to get that apprentice and then being a tradesperson themselves. And what's happening now? There's a huge dearth, a huge shortage, and they're crying out for them.
But I blame Blair as well. He kept saying that we want 50% to go to university. Actually, those people who had a trade, who did an apprenticeship, have a great career ahead of them. I have to say thank you very much, by the way, to Danny, who mended my boiler, Ollie, who mended my plumbing. But you're right. So if you find a great tradesman, you want to hang on to them.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the backbone of the nation. They're what keeps the heating on, the lights on, the water flowing.
Welcome to my Christmas. Peter, thanks very much for the moment. Sadiq Khan gets a knighthood if you are just waking up. PM Knights Khan in a reward for failure. That's the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Loads of other papers have the same story. The Daily Mail this morning, PM's reward for failure. Sadiq Khan is knighted. How does that make you feel this morning? Does it stick in your throat? Lots of you getting in touch. Mandy from Guildford, Dr. David Khan getting a knighthood. It's a joke, and made the whole system of giving knighthoods a whole joke now, and I, for one, have no respect for it. It means nothing anymore. Good morning to Dave in Aberdeen, sunny Aberdeen. Good morning, David. Sadiq Khan's knighthood is 2 fingers up at the public. Starmer will be laughing whilst lying on Lord Ali's sunbed. Of course, we know that Starmer is away on holiday at the moment. This is interesting. Good morning, David. Peter answered the question about why this useless individual has received a knighthood. Votes. Khan is focused on the brown element of London, which is rapidly becoming the majority and re-elected. Starmer wants those votes, so what better way than rewarding Khan? It's a damning indictment of the mediocrity that London has come to represent. Actually, that's a brilliant point. Of course, both of them lawyers, but I think there is a huge mediocrity in people standing for public office.
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, the trouble is, when so many of them do get into public office, what they then chase are riches. They want money. And so they associate themselves with people that are moneyed. They allow people that are moneyed to buy them suits and spectacles and such like. And they then turn into a very unedifying spectacle. They then want money. They get into these high offices, they want the honours, they want money, they go off after their political lives into these speaking gigs, these consultancy gigs, and all that kind of nonsense. But what has made me chuckle in recent times is watching some very, very average MPs getting booted out, essentially, because they lose their seats. And, of course, they've previously been on 80, 90 grand a year. And then watch those talentless half-wits struggle to get a job that pays anywhere near what they used to get for sitting in Westminster.
But they're so unprepared. That's the whole point, isn't it? They come out into the open jobs market. They have no skills that are actually transferable, and of course that's why they're not being employed. So it's going to be interesting, and that's why a lot of Labour MPs, first-time Labour MPs, are looking at Keir Starmer thinking, I'm deeply nervous about the direction of travel, based on that mega poll I talked about yesterday, and the direction of travel for Labour. Let's go to a break. After the break, we'll talk more about what's going on in the papers, some other big stories as well. The New Year's honours list. Peter highlighted some great New Year's honours, those people who've gone over and above what they should do, those people who are fighting cancer, who've actually raised money for other cancer charities, for example. They should get honours. But should people like Sadiq Khan, Emily Thornberry be given honours? Your thoughts after this break. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
What do you make of this Kemi Badonoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Kemi Badonoch didn't need to do it. She didn't need to raise the problem. She didn't need to raise the issue that many, many more people who used to vote Conservative are now going to vote Reform.
We speak to Reform people, they're like, thank you, Kemi Badonoch.
Yeah.
You've done us a huge favour. This story was going away. Yes, we had our surge in numbers. Yes, we'd overtaken you. And just with your tweet on Boxing Day, you just gave us another week of coverage. Thank you so much.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, Morning Glory. This is Talk 651, New Year's Eve. Are you ready, prepared, ready to go and celebrate the beginning of 2025? Peter Blexley joins me this morning. Loads of messages coming in as well. If you are just waking up, though, here's a big headline for you. PM knights Khan in reward for failure. Gareth Southgate wins a title for failure. Your thoughts on all of that, please. Good morning, David and Peter. This is Dave in Bristol. Happy New Year, although I think Starmer will ensure that those of us who are not part of his favoured sections of the community can't look forward to one. How do I feel that Khan has been knighted? David, I feel ashamed. I'm ashamed of London. I'm ashamed of the country I was once proud to be part of. The country and its capital are now cesspits of greed, of crime, entitlement. It makes me so sad to see what Britain has been driven to by people like Khan, squabbling, inert Conservative politicians, and now by a megalomaniac Marxist and a bunch of fanatical socialists who are driven by ideology and who will do whatever it takes, damage whatever they have to tighten their grip on power. Dave, thank you for a very powerful message this morning. Hello, David. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Hello. Happy New Year to you. I love Peter Blexley.
Thank you very much.
Well, who doesn't, Peter?
Happy New Year.
Also, John on the Isle of Coll. Hi, just to mention that people who are given awards have the option to refuse them. That's a great point. In fact, we'll talk more about that a little later on, and there are quite big notable examples. I think Dawn French turned hers down originally because she said, I don't think I need to get an award. All I do is get paid to have fun on television. I thought that was quite a good...
Benjamin Zephaniah, the famous poet and speaker, said he couldn't take one from a system that he felt had been a part of oppressing him and his fellows.
I think that takes a lot of guts, actually, to turn it down.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, without a doubt. But if you're principled, you're principled.
Well, quite right. Also, when everyone said Southgate was given the award for failure, he could have turned it down. Great point. Therefore, mitigating the headlines of rewarding failure. So his decision to take it and the headlines are justified. That's John on the Isle of Coll. Let's pop across the pond, shall we? Let's go to Michigan in the United States. Cindy is on the line. Good morning to you, Cindy.
Hey, Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Mr. Blexley. I adore you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Everyone adores Peter Blexley.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You need police officers like Peter Blexley over in the States, let me tell you.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. 100%. And I want to say all the way here in America about now Sir Khan.
Yes.
I'm angry. He doesn't deserve it. He's failed on protecting the people. The crime rates are through the roof, and I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted because it's another example of the people not being listened to.
I think you're right.
They signed a petition. Even it's like what, the 1 millionth example.
We'll find the exact number, actually, but, I mean, certainly hundreds of thousands of people have signed the petition against Sadiq Khan. Look, you know, even if I'm trying to be objective about this, Sadiq Khan has come in London. I've been in London since I was 18, which is a considerable time. I have never seen, and I agree with Peter, I've never seen it fall apart so quickly. So we're seeing spiralling knife crime. We've essentially legalised shoplifting. You just walk into your local Tesco, take steak out. I can't ever see a police officer on the street. If you try and travel anywhere in this capital, you have to go at 20 miles an hour. He's actually reduced the roads so that we've made congestion worse. He's then stuck all these fines, so you have to pay congestion charge, ultra-low emission zone. He's essentially penalising the lowest paid.
Well, I'll tell you, I've visited before, and you know what? I didn't think twice at the time. This was, of course, about 15 years ago. I didn't think twice about going to London. Now I would. I'm a little bit nervous about.
Just
if I had to go to London.
Well, I mean, well, maybe Peter can counter that. Should she be nervous coming to London?
It really breaks my heart to say this, but only yesterday there was a man who'd come from Malta, and he was posting on social media, and it got a lot of views. He was saying he'd been in London 24 hours. His sister, who was travelling with him, had had her phone stolen, and he'd just had to pay the equivalent of 18 or 20 pounds for a couple of meals from a fast food outlet. He said, don't come here. Now, of course, it is the city in which my heart resides, lives and loves. I love this city. There is still so much about it that is wonderful, but I revert to my statement of earlier on and said, show me someone who says that London has got better since 2016, and I'll show you that very same person who is clearly deluded. It's got worse.
Well, I mean, also... I was going to say, actually, Sadiq Khan has also spent time renaming those overground lines, the Weaver line, for example, instead of tackling crime. Sorry, Cindy, you were saying?
Yeah, please. I want to ask your opinion on something. How is it that the people can be so constantly ignored? I hear story after story after story, and I'm angry. I'm angry for the people. I feel like I'm also not being heard because I love the UK, but the people, my God.
I think it's a very fair point, Cindy. Thank you for being angry on our behalf. Really good to talk to you. Wish you a very happy New Year. I think it's 2 a.m. actually, so you're already... no, it's 2 a.m. Yes, it's 2 a.m. in Michigan, so I wish you a very happy New Year. Cindy, thanks ever so much for calling in. Let me know your thoughts, please, as well, on that. Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood. Does that stick in your throat? Is that the right thing to do? Does it show that just political patronage here? Gareth Southgate, another one. Should he have got an award?
Well, as you pointed out earlier, getting a knighthood for coming second, well, if I came second, my wife would nominate me for a knighthood. I'm sorry if that's put anybody off their cornflakes.
It's just speechless. Well done, Peter. You got your gag in there. I mean, it is extraordinary, and loads of people are getting in contact about that. This one, Tony in Bexley, says the Ulez disruptors should be knighted. Yes! Not Khan and his failure. Of course, they would be called far right. They'd be thrown in the slammer. Great show, David, and the fantastic... But you've got a big fan club. Fantastic, Peter. Best regards and Happy New Year. That's Tony in Bexley. Good morning, Doctor. This is Chris. Khan and Thornberry getting honoured is a disgrace. Also, Labour are against capitalist ways, so why take an honour? All champagne socialists. They are filling their greedy pockets. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Just on that note, have the right people been given an award? Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. Peter, our time is over.
Well, thank you for having me. It is a great honour to be able to broadcast to the audience. It really is something I take very seriously and I'm deeply flattered about. And I'd also like to thank everybody at this channel for enabling me to come on as I do. And finally, I'd like to wish everybody what I hope turns out to be a Happy New Year.
Very well said, Peter. It's always a great pleasure to have you. I wish you a very Happy New Year as well. Thanks ever so much for coming in. Lots more still to come. Don't go anywhere.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock. This is Morning Glory. I'm David Bull, in for Mike Graham on New Year's Eve. Well, a very happy New Year to you. We're not quite there yet. Very sadly, of course, Hogmanay celebrations have been cancelled up in Edinburgh, but we are keeping an eye on London. There are weather warnings in place. If we get any more information on that, I will bring it to you as soon as we get it. And, of course, being New Year, the New Year's Honours list has been announced, and that is the front page of many of the papers this morning. The Daily Telegraph, the Prime Minister knights Khan in a reward for failure. Let's just think about that, shall we? Spiralling knife crime, no police officers on the streets. The underground is a mess. Lots of those lines don't seem to work most of the time. The traffic has been brought to a standstill. Congestion charge, Ulez, penalising the poorest in society. And, of course, Khan going after a block vote. Should he have got a knighthood? Let me know your thoughts on that, please. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Also, Gareth Southgate, someone made a brilliant point in the last hour, just saying, of course, if you're offered an honour, you can turn it down. And there are lots of examples of people who have turned down honours in the past. So Gareth Southgate should or could have turned that down if he had wanted to. Let's talk more about the political situation and all the latest political stories. Joining me now is Stephen Woolfe, former member of the European Parliament. Good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, all right. Always good to talk to you, Stephen. Just in terms of this, you know, look, I have very mixed feelings about the honours list. I think there are some really deserving individuals on there, those people who have supported charities. We heard about a little girl who has cancer, who's raised money for other people with cancer. We've heard about those who have raised money to make wigs for people who are being treated for cancer. They are ultimately deserving of those awards. Sadiq Khan, I don't think so.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think the honours list now has been abused for many years, particularly those who are elevated to the House of Lords. There are some, as we know, that are genuinely decent and good people that get there, but the vast majority of them are elevated to the House of Lords because of the deals that are done in political parties to ensure that votes go through either in the Commons or because they are able to help a political leader. But when it comes down to other honours across the country, I think most genuine people in this country would recognise that that child who succeeded in helping people, or the wig maker, are the type of people who exactly deserve those honours. And I would like to see only those types of people for doing so. Giving it to actors and film stars, I think is vanity. I think it's something that, particularly when Labour do it, is for those who've come out and supported them on Twitter and Facebook to say, vote for our party. I just don't think many of them actually deserve it.
I would agree with that. I mean, I mentioned Stephen Fry earlier, 67 years old, the host of QI and many other shows as well. He's actually been knighted for his services to mental health. Now, I applaud that because he has the platform to talk about mental health, to get it out in the open. I agree with you. He shouldn't be given the award for what he does, which is act.
No, I absolutely agree. And if it is genuinely for the mental health issues, I'm fully supportive of people. I know have family members who suffer from severe mental health illnesses. And I've grown up and watched the travesty that, you know, I know this is a difficult subject, but most people growing up on my estate I saw with marijuana have developed mental health issues. And so it's a very personal thing to me to see people achieve success in helping raise that particular issue. So if he's got that, that's fine. But genuinely, I think year on year, we see a continued expansion of the honours system for those people that I think generally the ordinary man and woman in the street thinks don't deserve it.
Also, Emily Thornberry. Now, if you remember, Emily Thornberry was the one who tweeted that picture of a house, do you remember it, in Rochester with the St George's flag? And she basically just, she was insinuating that it was racist because they had a flag of St George. Now, she's also got an honour. That's, in my humble opinion, deeply misplaced.
I think it's scandalous, to be honest. I remember her coming out at the time, along with several others, I have to admit, who call people who have the England flag effectively racist, because that was the undertone of their statements. And also, I think, if one looks back into the history of many of these Labour politicians, they've also said that we don't believe in places like the House of Lords or indeed our royal family. So if they have that hypocrisy, why are we doubling the hypocrisy by giving them a award? Like you've quite rightly said, they have an opportunity to turn it down, but they don't. I remember, we're going to talk about John Prescott perhaps later on and when we're dealing with Tony Blair, but John Prescott was vehemently against the House of Lords, and yet he loved accepting that honour when it was given to him. That's what turns people off politicians. They make a statement, they say they have a belief, and then they go completely the opposite of it to take an honour like that so they can get a sinecure. £360 a day, I think it is, for turning up at the House of Lords. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Can I just ask you, going back to Sadiq Khan, because we were talking yesterday about Keir Starmer, I think he's in quite a difficult... I hope you're all right there. He's in quite a difficult position. I think you can see the forces massing behind him. We talked about the mega poll yesterday, where Labour is projected to lose so many seats. You've got incumbent new MPs who are deeply concerned about the direction of travel. I think you've got people like Angela Rayner, like Wes Streeting, looking up in their contact books to see whether they could mount a leadership campaign. One of those people that Keir Starmer has to keep close, remember, keep your friends close, your enemies closer still, is Sadiq Khan. I can't help forgetting the time that Sadiq Khan described protesters rallying against the Ulez, if you remember. He called them far-right COVID deniers and Tories, which is deeply insulting. Let's remind ourselves of what he said.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group. Let's be frank. Let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers, and some are Tories.
It's just embarrassing, isn't it?
It is, and I'm surprised no one actually pulled him up and make him have an apology for saying a spade is a spade. I thought that was a racist phrase nowadays that's been banned from our lexicon.
It has, you're right. But also just to lump anyone that he hates altogether, just because you are opposed to Ulez, because basically it's a terrible policy, to lump it together and then use the most inflammatory language. I'm sorry, that man does not deserve a knighthood.
Oh, absolutely. There's plenty of that, but that's the key example of the type of individual he is. I think he's nasty. I think he's bitter and absolutely twisted in the way that he wants to cause divisions. He says he wants to bring people together. The statements he made are actually the opposite of that. And that is the person who's not deserving of any honour whatsoever. But I think you've got it on the nail, though, David, is quite frankly, Keir Starmer is actually frightened him in some ways because of the power that he wields in bringing certain left-wing elements of the party to support him. And also the rise of reform, which is an incredibly welcome thing. And I hope, just as an aside, that one day we do see you in the House of Commons as an MP, Dave.
Well, that's very kind of you, Stephen.
No, I would like to see that, because then we'd have sensible people in there who understand what the people of this country are demanding, not a small sect of what I'm now terming the Maoist Red Book carriers. And I believe that he is one of those types of individuals willing to destroy the fabric of our nation with division and language like that, which ultimately causes a divide in our democracy.
I think actually London is pretty unrecognisable from the city I came to when I was 18. Talking of unrecognisable, I think Britain has changed beyond belief, and that feeds very nicely into this other story in the Telegraph. This is about Tony Blair and the accession of those 8 countries, those Eastern European countries, in 2004. Now, you and I were both in the European Parliament, so we know better than most people about the gravy train that is the European Union. But Tony Blair was urged to be very cautious. Remember, when the Czech Republic came in, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia, those closest to him said, hang on a minute, having unfettered migration into the United Kingdom will have downsides. But it was Blunkett that persuaded Blair just to open the gates. They completely downplayed the numbers that would come to the United Kingdom because basically they didn't have a clue how many were going to come, and they were proved to be enormously wrong in those expectations. He was told you need a transition period, and I would argue those people arguing for that transition were right.
Oh, they were absolutely right. I mean, I think what we had was a big issue, and I think the papers that we're now seeing has a particular statement which I find deeply concerning, but shows exactly what the elite and those in the Treasury were thinking, is when they said that we needed the productivity and flexibility of migrant workers to carry on building our economic success. That in itself was a statement that was made very clear in those papers. It was supported by those who were asked to do a report. So the time was Dustin and Hoffman. In 2003, for the Home Office, were asked to create a paper on the impact of EU enlargement on migration flows. They said it would be between 5,000 and 13,000 a year. We know 87,000 came in the first year. And so they also knew the devastating effect that massive immigration would have on wages and the employment opportunities of the local people in the areas that these people came to.
And I was arguing with Peter Blexley that actually I think this was the beginning of what turned into the Brexit movement. The fact is you had unfettered migration, we had cheap labour coming in. In fact, the word I'd use is disposable labour. That was the whole point. It was cheap labour. It undercut the professions, the trades in this country, like electricians, plumbers and so on. So those people then weren't employed because people went to the cheaper option, and I can understand why they did that. But that then started to build the resentment about the change to the United Kingdom's fabric and the unfettered migration that we'd seen.
It was, David, but also people tend to forget that in the 3 years before that, we'd also had huge numbers of asylum seekers. In the year 2000 to 2001, 103 asylum seekers came to the United Kingdom. There were huge numbers at that time, about nearly 300,000 in 3 years. So we had the transformation of our country beginning, and that elevated it. And you're quite right. I do think that's where the resentment of our politicians came in, from a country that had accepted immigration slowly, but ultimately in a very fair and peaceful way, of those who were coming over from the Windrush, those who'd come from Uganda. Those came in numbers that were manageable within this country and accepted those that wanted to work.
But there was a fundamental difference. Sorry, there was a fundamental difference with Windrush, was they wanted to integrate.
That's right, and that's exactly what my point was. The numbers were small, and they wanted to integrate, and we saw that with those from Uganda too, who came here and worked very hard setting up businesses. And yes, we're not saying that those who didn't come across from the Eastern Europe, as we know, I've got many Polish friends and
as do I,
who worked extremely hard, but then we also know that a lot didn't, and there were warnings from the European Union and several EU countries about the Roma communities that would come over for benefits. Blair himself, in this same report that we've now just had published, recognises there were dangers in that. But it was the Treasury, with Andrew Smith, who was probably one of the weakest left-wing and more opportunistic MPs for the Labour Party at that time, along with Blunkett, that went along with the argument that we needed it for economic reasons, which is contrary to what Tony Benn said in Arguments of Socialism, where he said this country wanted to have a low-skilled mass immigration country, low-skilled, low-wage. Those were his words. And that's exactly what Tony Blair ushered into this country in 2004 and destroyed the fabric of our nation since.
Let's move on and talk about a final story, if we may, which is about mental health sick days. Public sector workers are 3 times more likely to take mental health sick days than those in the private sector. This is also in the Telegraph this morning. The number of mental health sick days taken nationwide grew by 6.6% between 2020 and 2022, rising from 13.7 million to 14.6 million. There are lots of things I could say about this, but those people who are self-employed tend not to take mental health sick days.
No, those people like myself who are self-employed know that we have to get up in the morning and work and earn our income. We don't get a pension. We don't get any money towards our holidays. And we don't have anybody that we can replace us from doing that job or actually just ignore the work that's being done. But in the civil service, which is growing dramatically and is estimated to grow even more, we've in this country under Labour, where they also have salaries now that are outstripping those in the private sector. This is the sector that actually pays their wages. And we also see them becoming ill. And what I get, and I mentioned it early on, David, is that I believe that mental health illness is a really serious thing. But I think the way that we've expanded the definitions just to make you feel as though you're having a sad day falls within these categories is actually very discriminatory to those people who have schizophrenia and other types of serious mental health illnesses. And that's what's been embedded into the system in the public service. And I think anybody now can just turn around and say, I'm ill. And doctors need to be really very, very careful about doing this and whether we provide medication to people very, very quickly. It's not going to happen so quickly in the private sector because people have the opportunities to employ other people. The public sector just doesn't. They don't care.
And this goes back to Aradazi's report. The fact is, and we talked about this yesterday, whether the GP really should be the gatekeeper to accessing all those benefits, because really what we're doing is over-medicalising people. And as you rightly say, there is a massive distinction between those people with paranoid schizophrenia, for example, or major depressive episodes, than those people who are just feeling a little bit stressed because work is difficult. Just very quickly, if I may, we talked also about the mega poll earlier in the week, showing that actually Labour is deeply unpopular, that Keir Starmer has some major problems. We talked about Sadiq Khan. He's one of those people I think will be polishing his contact book and looking for backers. How do you view the future of the Labour Party in the next couple of months?
I think they're going to try and rally around Keir Starmer for the first part of the new year, because they feel that they're going to have to relaunch the Labour Party and try and find some way. Yes, I think they will, because the first relaunch failed absolutely dismally. And they know that these polling figures are quite dramatic. And I'm very well done to Reform. I think when you look at the way they've done it on a smaller budget and now they're bringing in new money, I think that's going to be a tremendous asset to them. It was an incredibly smart thing to do, publishing their membership online live, and the immature attack by, which was surprising. I never expected the Conservative leader Badonoch to actually to actually have a go at Nigel Farage in that way. I think everyone's running frightened of them, but that's the movement that's being created by Reform has a really massive impact in those Northern Labour seats. And that's why I think that they'll rally round Keir Starmer initially. But as you've already identified, I think there'll be movements. Behind the scenes, people will be starting to look at ways in which they can build their own platforms for leadership in the future. The Labour Party will get rid of him if they feel that they're going to lose seats, because that's what MPs do.
How long's he got?
I would say, I'm going to be an outlier, so I'm going to say he's got at least a year, to be honest, because I don't think they want to be seen to get rid of him. Because one thing that's very true about politics, once you start taking away your key figures, once they start being removed from the cabinet or your friends and assets, they spot a weakness. And once they've got that first individual, a chip in your wall, they'll take you down. And I don't think they want that chip in the wall just yet. They need to find ways of regrouping So I think they'll give him longer than most people think. And I don't think he deserves it. But who else is going to replace him at the moment?
Really good to talk to you, Stephen. I wish you a very happy New Year. Thanks ever so much for joining me this morning on New Year's Eve. Stephen Wolfe, their former member of the European Parliament. We'll take a break. After the break, we'll talk about the latest immigration figures. I want to talk more, actually, about Blair opening the borders despite the warnings. This is 2004, the accession of 8 Eastern European countries into the European Union, what it meant for the United Kingdom. I'm going to be talking to Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator and ex-advisor to Yvette Cooper. That's all still to come. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
What do you make of this Badonoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Badonoch didn't need... Let's talk about this mega poll, because I think even Labour hardliners will be shocked to see that if there was an election tomorrow, not only would they lose their majority, but they would lose 200 seats and possibly more. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, I mean, it's highly encouraging for everybody who believes in the future of this country and wants it to succeed.
Yeah.
It's only been 6 months or so since Labour have got in, and even a kind of hardcore partisan like me didn't believe it would be this bad this fast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk, this is Morning Glory, 7:25, Tuesday, December the 31st, New Year's Eve. David Bull here in for Mike Graham. Thanks ever so much for your company. Wow, what do you make of the headlines this morning? If you are waking up, the Daily Telegraph, the Prime Minister has knighted Sadiq Khan, as the paper says, in reward for failure. The Daily Mail says exactly the same. Prime Minister's reward for failure as Sadiq Khan is knighted. Also, actually, going back to the Telegraph, Gareth Southgate wins a title as well. There's a picture of him there. He's been awarded a knighthood after becoming one of England's most successful football managers. Lots of you getting in touch about that. Matt in Cardiff, good morning to you. Great show. Thanks very much. Good morning, David. After knighting Southgate Southgate for failure, what will be the reward for Thomas Tuchel if he actually wins the World Cup? It's a very good point. Yes, well, obviously it would have to be higher than a knighthood, I would assume. I'll go through some of those in a minute. We'll talk more, actually, about the honours list. I'm going to be talking to Matthew Goodwin Freeman, who's a Conservative councillor, at about 7:30. Oh, so not long until I talk to him. Let's talk now about the migration figures. Joining me now, Danny Shaw, who's the Home Affairs commentator and ex-advisor to Yvette Cooper. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David. Hi.
Yeah, really good to talk to you. Now, look, there's a really interesting article here about what happened in 2004, the accession of those Eastern European countries of the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia. And when that happened, Blair was urged by those people closest to him saying, hang on, let's not have an open door policy. Let's have a transition period, which many other countries did, to ensure that we weren't overwhelmed by the number of people. But it was people like Blunkett who pushed Blair, and they woefully underestimated the numbers that would come to the United Kingdom.
Yes, I mean, I remember this argument at the time, David. I was covering it as a Home Affairs correspondent, and there was a Home Office internal paper going around that has suggested that the numbers coming would be around 13,000, something like that. I mean, a very small number. And the Home Office, and Blunkett, I think, was a Home Secretary at the time, clearly believed that this wasn't going to be a big problem. The economy really needed an influx of people coming in. And he was supported by Andrew Smith, who was another cabinet minister as well. And they managed to persuade Tony Blair, Prime Minister at the time, that there didn't need to be any transitional controls. So that people from Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Estonia and so on could come, work in the UK, and there wouldn't be any problem whatsoever. And of course, they were completely wrong. But what's interesting is that from these papers that have just been released, is that there were other senior members of the cabinet who were warning Blair that this was going to be a problem. Jack Straw, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, later said that it was a spectacular mistake. And I think John Prescott as well was advising Blair to put some kind of controls on people, either visa system, permit system, something like that, as most other European countries did. But Blair let people come in, and the result was that we had sort of net EU migration of around 200,000 a year. Now, what we wouldn't give for those figures now.
Well, quite. I mean,
net migration of around 700 to 900.
But the margin of error there, from 13,000 up to 200,000, it shows just how woefully inadequate those projections were. And actually, that was a catastrophic mistake, and it was a failure of governance.
I think in terms of immigration and sustainability, in terms of social housing and all the infrastructure that needed to be put in place, yes, it was a mistake. In terms of the economy, it's probably harder to judge because, a lot of the people came and did work that wasn't, that there was no supply of labour for here.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. They certainly undercut traditional British workers.
There was a certain argument about undercutting. I remember some other papers at the time saying that there was a net benefit to the economy. So, to be honest, I'm not, completely clear about what the evidence, the total evidence was about the benefit economically.
I mean, I think what we saw was loads of people coming here working very hard, and I can't take that away from them. But Peter Blexley is right. You saw 6, 7 people in a room, single men, particularly single men, then sending the money overseas to their family, and I don't blame them for doing that. So essentially, you had cheap labour, you had money leaving the country, and no trace of that money at all. Meanwhile, we lost our skills, we lost our trades. You got Tony Blair then saying, well, actually, don't be a carpenter, go to university. That was a terribly misguided policy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, this big push to get people into higher education, into universities, without any really equivalent scheme to drive up apprenticeships and trades and so on, and just get people coming in from overseas to do these jobs. I think we can look back and say that was a mistake. There should have been some controls put in, and he should have listened to the advice of some of his senior colleagues, and he didn't. when other European countries were putting those controls in at the time. But I remember those arguments raging very, very clearly, in 2004, and suddenly we had this influx of Poles and, other people coming in. And also that, the composition of towns and cities changed extraordinarily as well, and communities weren't prepared for it, and the infrastructure wasn't in place.
100%. When I look at the numbers since 2010, net migration has added 3.7 million people to the population. That's higher than the population of Wales. It's 8 times the size of Liverpool. And you're right, there wasn't the infrastructure, the doctors, the hospitals, the education, the schools, the houses. There is also, just in terms of that, net migration means that you need about 120,000 new homes every year. We simply aren't building it. We are not capable of actually accommodating the numbers that are coming in.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why, the government is saying it's committed to reducing net migration. I think it's wise not to put a target on it, because I think, firstly, people don't believe the targets because the Conservatives failed to hit the targets. And secondly, the immigration numbers are made up of different categories of people. They're made up of people who are coming here to flee persecution, Ukrainians, people from Hong Kong, and so on, for example, and Afghanistan. And if there's a sudden, war on the continent, we have to admit people to flee the war, then the numbers are going to go up. And the other thing is students, foreign students. We know that that's a driver for the economy and particularly for universities. So if that's why I don't think it's helpful to look at just one ball target, but to look at each sector bit by bit and say, well, what can we do to ensure we don't have to get an influx of engineers from abroad? Well, we have to get our engineering companies to offer apprenticeships and training schemes, and so that we can employ British-based people. That's what I think you have to do. You have to take a sector-by-sector approach. But clearly the numbers are unsustainable and are too high, and the previous government, I'm afraid, was responsible for that.
Let's also talk. The thing that will inflame people this morning is they are seeing just uncontrolled immigration into this country, but also spiralling crime. We talked about Sadiq Khan presiding over enormous increase in knife crime in London and being rewarded. But also, there's this story that says the Home Office tried to halt the private prosecution of a foreign shoplifter. Essentially, he had been involved in 7 shoplifting offences. The police failed to arrest him on multiple occasions. So a private security firm called My Local Bobby actually then made an arrest. They mounted a private prosecution of him. He's a Romanian migrant. Police failed to turn up to this store after 7 shoplifting raids. They then mounted a private prosecution. The Home Office then lent on the prosecutors to say, please drop this case because we are trying to deport him. What's going on here?
I've got to say, this is one of the most puzzling stories. The most stories that you come across, you can sort of explain it or perhaps see the logic behind it. Just cannot understand with this one. This guy, Ionetchenko, 43 years old, illegal Romanian, 7 times caught shoplifting, thousands of pounds worth of goods. The police are called. Apparently they never turn up. You might understand them not coming perhaps the first time, but the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time, they don't come. He's then finally detained by this private security group who mount their private prosecution. The Home Office saying, drop it because we're trying to take action against him to deport him. I don't understand, really, because they know that if he's going to be prosecuted again for this, they can deport him at the end of that sentence. Or surely would have said, OK, well, let's speed up the deportation proceedings that we've got. The whole thing seems to me to be a completely dysfunctional system. You've got the police not responding to sort of so-called lower-level crime, although shoplifting can be serious crime because of the value of the goods stolen and the impact on retailers. And then you've got the immigration system not working properly. I mean, will he really be deported at the end of his prison term? He's got a 22-week sentence. I mean, he'll be out within just 11. A few weeks of that. Are they going to be waiting at the prison gates and detaining him and then putting him on a plane back to Romania? Really? I'd be really surprised if that happens, just because...
And I think that's what people are seeing this morning. The injustice of all of this is that you can be a repeated offender, you finally actually get sentenced, and then you are let free to roam again, to steal. There seems to be absolutely no justice being served in this country. And the gaps also between all those agencies not working together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the really disturbing thing here, is that if the agencies actually got their act together and did work together, then this guy could have been arrested and probably deported straight away. You know, I think it'd be really interesting now to track that case and to see what happens at the end of his prison sentence and whether he is actually removed. I mean, you know, we need immigration for some, you know, labour shortages that we can't fill. And we offer sanctuary to people who are really fleeing persecution. But what we don't need is prolific criminals in our country. And this guy fits that category. And it's a clear-cut case. He shouldn't be here. He should be back in his home country.
Well said. Danny, wish you a very happy New Year. Thanks for joining me this morning. That's Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator and ex-advisor to Yvette Cooper. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking more about the New Year's honours list. Do you think the right people got New Year's honours? Sadiq Khan's on there, Emily Thornberry, lots of other people. Stephen Fry, for example. We'll talk more about that after this break. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, 7:39, Tuesday, December the 31st, last day of the year, New Year's Eve. Welcome along. This is Morning Glory with me, David Bull. Right, this morning, if you are just waking up, good morning. And the New Year's honours list is out. Lots of, well, I suppose some surprises. Some of these had been widely speculated about, but Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been knighted. This is obviously Sir Keir Starmer's first New Year's honours list. And many people are questioning this because, of course, he's presided over spiralling knife crime in the capital. Knife crime has increased by more than 50%. Violent crime has soared, despite a 71% increase in the portion of council tax that Londoners pay to City Hall. Now, it's also just worth remembering, as someone who's been in London for many, many years, We've also had the battle over Ulez. We've also seen the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour zones. This is a man, by the way, who said it was un-British to host a state visit of the new president, of President Trump, to this country. On top of that, we've also got Emily Thornberry also being given an honour. And if you remember, she was the one in Rochester who essentially was calling people racist for flying a flag of St George outside their house with a white van parked outside. Emily Thornberry, you'd be well advised to remember these are your voters. Well, joining me now is Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who's a Conservative councillor, and he also created a petition to stop Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood. A very good morning to you.
Morning, David.
Really good to talk to you. Now, look, Sadiq Khan, he has been voted in yet again as Mayor of London. I said London has changed irrevocably. Since I moved here when I was 18, I do not recognise this capital anymore. It is divided, it's divisive, the knife crime is off the scale. I don't see any police. All I see is congestion. They've actually narrowed all the lanes so that what was a dual carriageway, essentially, particularly down the highway here, has become a single carriageway. You can't go more than 20 miles an hour. It would be quicker and cheaper to buy a donkey.
Well, that's the thing. London, is not the great city that it used to be. And anyone called Sadiq Khan who seems to tell you that it is frankly lying to you. As you said in the introduction, crime is through the roof. The trains don't run. We're seeing no houses being built. We're seeing the battles about the Ulez expansion and costs being put up, like fares and fines, charges on the Blackwall and Silvertown tunnel, and obviously the mayor's share of council tax has gone up 71% as well. So Londoners are struggling to afford to live in London anymore, and yet we're waking up this morning to a nightmare. No, not a knighted mayor, a nightmare in itself, that Sadiq Khan is now Sir Sadiq. And I'm telling you now, I shan't be calling him that, and I definitely shan't be bowing.
No, definitely. I would agree with that. Just in terms of that, how much of this is political? I mean, it's deeply political, isn't it? But one of the things that I'm speculating is that I think Keir Starmer's position is fragile. He is watching those people who may well pose a threat to him, who may want to depose him. I would think that Sadiq Khan is one of those people who has his eye on the top job.
Well, he probably thinks that he could get the top job, but let's remember this is the same Sadiq Khan who wasn't welcomed back into Parliament at the last general election, so decided to stand for a third term as Mayor of London. And that's the general consensus, that he wanted to come back into Parliament, but Labour frankly said no. It just is confusing that we wake up this morning and he's been given a knighthood for failure. Maybe it is a hand-me-out, maybe it's to keep him quiet. Who knows? But we're now going to get 4 years in London where he continues as mayor still. This is whilst he's still the mayor of London, of him just self-congratulating himself and rubber-stamping everything he does.
And of course, many people would say his priorities are incredibly misguided. You know, the renaming, for those people who don't know what I'm talking about, the overground lines that run in or certainly transect with the underground have all been named. Things like the Weaver Line and Windrush and so on. 6.8 million quid he spaffed up the wall doing that.
Yeah, so 7 million quid effectively to rename 6 train lines. I mean, you and I would have done it for what, half that price maybe?
Yeah,
I mean,
grand.
his track record is just failure. Crime is through the roof. He's had 140 days of strikes. When he promised us 0, he was given £7 billion in bailouts to keep the trains and buses running. He was given £4 billion to build houses as it only started 4% of them, and costs have gone through the roof. We've said about council tax, we've said about Ulez, fines on the Silvertown and Blackwall tunnels. It just makes no sense. And there is genuine anger out there at this decision.
So that's another thing I just don't understand. Putting a tariff on the Blackwall tunnel, which is an artery, a main artery into London, makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's a charge. It's a money grab. Just like how the Ulez expansion to outer London was said to be about cleaning up the air, yet Sadiq Khan's own impact assessment by Jacobs said it would have a negligible impact, and there's actually parts of London where it's got worse. It is just a money grab. And this is what he does. He gaslights Londoners. He lies to Londoners straight to their face to push through his agenda. But hey, that seems to get you a knighthood nowadays.
And just in terms of the petition, I saw the petition. It was widely adopted, wasn't it?
So it's absolutely exploded. We're up to 207,000 signatures. I have had emails from people across London saying, I don't understand how he's got this. And one of the criticisms that I've had throughout this is, well, I'm only doing this because it's a Labour mayor, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely not. There were petitions against Conservatives. I mean, Gavin Williamson, for example, also got a knighthood. But his petition only got 100 signatures. This is 206,000. So let's just put that to one side. This is fully about his track record as Mayor of London, elected 3 times on a 30% turnout. You know, he has not deserved this knighthood. He doesn't deserve this. And he needs to wake up to the fact that whilst he might have got the top gong, he's actually got to get out there and start delivering for London.
I mean, what difference will your petition make? Because no one will actually pay any attention to it. The politicians aren't going to listen, are they?
No, the whole point of this petition was to give people a voice and to show him that he does not have this universal support and love that he thinks he does. And I actually challenged him at People's Question Time a couple of weeks ago. And I said, look, at that point, nearly 200,000 people have signed this petition. He just laughed. But the whole point of that was to say, Sadiq, you do not have this universal love that you think in London. There are people in London struggling because of the decisions he's made about council tax, about Ulez, and obviously those families of teenagers who've been killed because knife crime's through the roof. It's an utter joke.
Really good to talk to you, Matthew. I wish you a very happy New Year. That's Matthew Goodwin, Freeman Conservative councillor. He was the one that created the petition to stop Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood. Lots of messages coming in. Good morning, Dr. David. I remember Nigel Farage being called a racist and over-exaggerating the Eastern European influx in 2004. But yet again, he was correct. Don in Chelmsford, good morning to you. Happy New Year to you. David, Tony Blair destroyed our country. He took us into what many think was an illegal war, and still he hangs around giving us his unwelcome opinions. There's no doubt Tony Blair is pulling some of those levers in Downing Street as well. Good morning, David. Happy New Year. Sadiq Khan has brought one of the greatest capital cities in the world to its knees. It makes me sick to my stomach to see him getting a knighthood. What has our country become? It is heartbreaking. I'll do one more. Peter says, good morning, David. Being awarded for good and charitable work is acceptable, but so often people are given high awards for just doing their jobs, and in many cases failing to do their jobs well. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chairman. I'm going to be talking about the number of days that people are taking off work because they claim they have mental health problems. I'm also going to be talking about this other story in the papers this morning, saying that those people who are on the public sector payroll could swap pay rises and get paid more if they reduce their pensions. That's all still to come. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, 8 minutes to 8. 8 minutes to 8 already. Good morning, this is Morning Glory. I'm David Bull. Thanks for your company on this New Year's Eve. Lots of messages coming in. Good morning, David. This honours thing, wow, it's an absolute joke. Sadiq Khan, what a disgrace. They give these things out like they're sweets. They don't mean anything anymore. That's Gary in Shrewsbury. Great show. And always good to hear Peter, of course, Peter Blexley, who was here with me for the first hour of the programme. If you weren't here, where were you? Joining me now, Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chairman. Good morning, Martin. Happy New Year.
Good morning, David, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Always good to talk to you. Shall we talk about this big story in the Telegraph this morning? Public sector workers are 3 times more likely to take mental health sick days than those in the private sector. I'm not entirely surprised by this. The number of mental health sick days taken nationwide grew by 6.6% between 2020 and 2022. It's risen from 13.7 million to 14.6 million. So essentially, there is a 3.6% sickness absent rate amongst state employees in 2022. Just over 1 in 8 of these days were taken off for mental health conditions such as stress, depression, anxiety and serious psychiatric problems. I think that we have to unravel quite a lot of this. That, you know, there is a major difference between serious psychiatric issues, as you know, like schizophrenia or chronic depression or whatever it is, and those people who are suffering some form of anxiety or social isolation. Also, when you compare and contrast those in the public sector with the private sector, you see a stark difference. And if you compare them with those people who are self-employed, you see an even starker difference.
Yeah. David, I think there's a number of issues, as you said here. I mean, one is obviously there are people, and I think of the NHS particularly, people on the front line who can find it quite stressful.
Sure.
And if they're short-staffed, 2 things happen. It puts them under more pressure, but it also means you have more agency and temporary staff coming in who they have to be briefed, and they often earn more for doing no more. And that is in itself encourages people, I think, to go off with mental health issues. I think there's a second issue here, David, and that is the profile of mental health has been raised so much by very people doing so very compassionately, and people like members of the royal family, some celebrities who have suffered with mental health issues, and actually, but actually, it's caused a surge in demand. And I think the third thing is, of course, the pandemic, where and remember this public sector employees, many of these employers are working from home as well, so that the old-fashioned British work ethic, I think, was somewhat punctured by the time of the pandemic, and we're suffering from that as well now.
I would agree, and also I think we talked about this yesterday. The isolation that many people felt in COVID and being locked down meant that people were at home. They lost any sense of aspiration or indeed, I kind of guess, drive to go out to earn a living. And we know, and I said this yesterday, that if you earn a living, if you go out there, it also reinforces your feeling of actually being worth something.
Yeah, and I think working from home can be equally stressful. I mean, I think there are people working from home who have, you know, the dog to look after, the children maybe to look after as well at the same time. And it's tough, it's difficult and challenging.
So let's look at NHS workers, and I think you touched on something really important there, which is just the number of unfilled vacancies. And I know from my friends in the health service that if you are running on a skeleton service, let's say you're a nurse, on a ward where you don't have enough people to actually manage the patients that you've got, that is deeply stressful. It means you have to do longer and longer hours where you feel you're pulling your hair out whilst you're doing it. And the reward for those agency staff that are being brought in feels deeply unfair.
Yes, and I think yes, absolutely it does, and I can speak from direct experience of that. I was still in the NHS until mid-2020. But I think that there's another issue here, David, that the culture of a lot of NHS organisations isn't really good enough in terms of the kind of atmosphere that people work in, the day-to-day recognition. It doesn't cost anything to say to a nurse or any other clinician, thanks for everything you've done. You know, that patient's really, I know, was so impressed by all the care you gave them. And I don't think there's enough of that. There's not enough what I call day-to-day motivational stuff coming through from the managers who are struggling to manage. They're managing rosters, they're managing patient demand, they're managing handovers, but are they leading? And that leadership, which inspires and encourages people, I don't think that always happens as it should do.
And of course, we're seeing, and Aradazi pointed to this in his report, hospital staffing up 17%, but productivity falling by 11%. But you're right, it's actually making sure that the staff who are working feel loved, that they are empowered. Let's also just talk about, I mean, there are fundamental and structural problems with the NHS. Let's talk about another story this morning. The Welsh ambulance service has declared a critical incident because of increased demand across the 999 service. It said more than 340 calls were waiting to be answered across Wales. They have announced a critical incident. One of the big problems here, which they cite, is the ambulances are getting to the hospital, but they can't get the patients out of the ambulances because there is nowhere for them to go, and that means, as you've seen, I've seen many, many times, ambulances back up on the ramp, and that means they can't be sent out to attend to people with life-threatening conditions.
David, the Welsh Health Service is an utter shambles. My family, we have many, many relations in Wales, and a number of them have suffered because of the Welsh Health Service, obviously run by the Labour Party there, who have run the government. It is an utter shambles.
Why is it so shambolic?
I think the way it's organised is shambolic. They work on health boards, who of course are both the commissioners and the providers, and that in itself doesn't work well and never has done. There is no proper local structures. My own in-laws were living in Wales when they both passed away some years back. And we had to, there was nothing linked up. My mother-in-law had dementia. We had issues where we had to contact psychiatric nurses, hospitals, social work, but nobody knew what the other was doing and what was going on. It is, from a local perspective, I think we're much, much better actually in England with providing a joined-up service than they are there. It is a mess.
Martin, really good to talk to you. I wish you a very happy new year. Thanks ever so much for your company this morning. Martin Gower, their former NHS Trust Chairman. We'll take a break now. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor and founder of Conservative Home, about what he thinks about Sadiq Khan being given an honour. That's still to come. This is Morning Glory. A very good morning to you.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or ball slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 8 o'clock on Tuesday, December the 31st, New Year's Eve. This is Morning Glory with me, David Bull. Thanks very much for your company. Are you all prepared? Do you know what you're doing tonight as we say goodbye to 2024 and a welcome in 2025? Well, of course, being New Year, it also means the New Year's honours list is out, and the front pages are full of it. Let me tell you, the Daily Telegraph front page this morning, PM Knights Khan. This is Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and they go on to say, in a reward for failure. The Daily Mail says, Prime Minister's reward for failure. So same wording here as Sadiq Khan is knighted. Your thoughts on that, please? Also, The Mirror, another newspaper, saying Sir Gareth has basically been honoured for failure. Is that what you have to do now to get an honour? You have to fail miserably to get an honour. Your thoughts on all of that, please? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Let's talk to Anne in Somerset now about the knighthoods, about the honours system, and whether it is fit for purpose. Good morning.
Good morning and a Happy New Year. Let's hope it is one for everyone.
Well, indeed, Happy New Year to you too.
Well, I just think we should stop getting ourselves, you know, upset about all these knighthoods and
Should
honours.
we?
Because at the end of the day, we don't have to acknowledge them. Simple as that. They mean nothing to me. I used to work with people with titles, but they're exactly the same as you and I, and most of them get paid really well for doing their job. So, you know, they're meaningless to me, the titles.
Thereby lies the problem, because actually if they were given out to those people who really deserve them, and I'm going to single out those people who are suffering from cancer, who've actually gone over and above and they've raised money for charities, or as we heard, those people who've made those wigs so that for children, so that when they have chemotherapy and they lose their hair, they have a wig to wear, they keep their dignity, and those sort of people, I think, are amazing, or dinner ladies, or whoever it is, those people who serve the community.
Absolutely, but you know what? Those people that serve the community because they want to.
Oh, of course.
They don't do it for titles.
I agree totally with you. What do you think about Sadiq Khan, then? You're happy with him getting a knighthood?
I don't even want to mention that man's name.
Well, but the point I'm making is, what does it say if we are essentially rewarding someone who has presided over the decline of a once great city, where you've got spiralling knife crime? He's essentially waged war on the motorists. Public transport doesn't work properly in London. He spent £7 million renaming the overground lines in this capital, and he's essentially been given an honour for failure.
He might have been given an honour by his creepy friends, but it means absolutely nothing to the rest of us, and we just don't have to sort of acknowledge it. Simple as that. If everybody stopped acknowledging these honours, they wouldn't exist, would they?
And very strong indeed. I wish you a very happy new year. Thanks ever so much for your call this morning. Well, let's bring Tim Montgomery in now, who's a former Number 10 advisor and founder of Conservative Home. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Sir David. Or have you not been knighted yet? Have you been forgotten?
Well, so funnily enough, I did look in the postbox this morning and no knighthood.
Same for me as well. I tell you, someone who should get an honour is Anne, you've just been speaking to.
Yes.
What a dose of common sense from her.
Well, quite right. I mean, Sadiq Khan, what do you think? I imagine you're pretty appalled by that.
I am. I disagree, I think, with Matthew Goodwin Freeman, who you had on a little while ago. I think London is still a great city, really one of the world's great cities. I'm talking to you from Salisbury, another great city, a little bit smaller. I still love coming up to London. You know, the entertainment, the infrastructure, the history, the museums. It's an amazing city. But what's absolutely true is London has gone downhill on him. It's, you know, just last week I heard from another friend who had their mobile phone snatched from their hand by a motorcyclist. You've already mentioned knife crime, some of the graffiti, some of the untidiness. It's definitely a city going in the wrong direction under him. But let's not diss London too much.
No, I agree. Look, I still say London is an amazing city. I've been here since I was 18. But also what I'm seeing is the demise of the small venues. Sadiq Khan pricing them out. Look at what he's done to Soho, for example. It's not the place it once was. No,
and also I think we're still struggling to have a nightlife in London. I think he had an advisor on nightlife who had to leave recently, and London still seems to, in a way that isn't true of other sort of major cities, it still seems to grind to a halt just after midnight. And for a lot of tourism, a lot of trade, that's a big missed opportunity.
Well, you're right. I think it was Amy Lame, wasn't it, who was the nighttime czar of London. She was paid an absolute fortune, and as far as I could see, didn't actually achieve anything at all. Maybe she should get a knighthood as well. Just in terms of that, can I just ask you your thoughts, please, on Emily Thornberry? Here's a woman who showed absolute disdain for the voters of Rochester.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid I really do disagree with you on this one.
Do you?
Why? Yeah, I like Emily a great deal. She's one of my favourite Labour MPs. She's honest, she talks us truth, and I think I don't know what she was thinking of with that famous photo. I defended her at the time, actually, and I just think sometimes there's a little bit of lack of grace in public life, and I don't think that was her view, but maybe I'm being very naive.
Well, she called Donald Trump, the new incoming American president, a racist, sexist predator. That's not language befitting of someone who holds high office.
No, well, if we use those criteria not to honour anyone, I think half the British establishment at least has been rude about Donald Trump. I love Donald Trump personally. I think he's a breath of fresh air in politics. But my goodness, if everyone who had said something mean about Donald Trump was excluded from the honour system, we'd probably have the system that Anne wanted. Your caller Anne wanted, and no one would be honoured.
Just looking at this, it starts with the British Empire Medal, and then it ranks up in ascendancy to an MBE, an OBE, CBE, a Knight or a Dame, Companion of Honour. Which do you fancy, Tim?
Oh, definitely Companion of Honour. I think, not least, for those who can't see the broadcast, my sartorial elegance definitely deserves to become Companion of Honour. Wearing a hoodie for people who are just listening. You look magnificent in a proper suit, and you're probably more worthy of an honour, David.
That's very kind indeed. Should we talk about EU accession? This is something that I know will upset many people, and this is about Tony Blair and what happened in 2004 and the accession of those 8 Eastern European countries. He was warned by many of his advisers, hang on a minute, let's not just open the floodgates and let anyone in from those countries into the United Kingdom. But it was Blunkett that pushed him hard, and eventually there was no transition period imposed, which many other countries did, including France. And as a result, the figures that they projected, so the numbers of people that they said would come here from those Eastern European countries, were miles out. They talked about 13,000. It turned out to be about 200,000.
Well, two things in response to that, David. First of all, I don't know whether we can even believe the migration numbers that we're given of that kind that you do. We don't actually count people coming in and out of our country. All the migration statistics are based on opinion surveys, which are done by the National Statistics Office, or whatever they're called now, and they just try and estimate how many people come in. So I reckon the official estimates could be out by a long way. So absolutely, Blair should have taken advice, and the numbers that came in were much greater than he said would come in. But I don't believe the numbers, I'm afraid. And then the second thing is, absolutely, Tony Blair deserves criticism, but compared to Blair years, the migration now is much, much larger into our country. The former party I supported, the Conservative Party, they said they would bring migration under control. And actually, it's now higher, even under the Blair years. It's an absolute disgrace.
And for many of our viewers and listeners, immigration is the number one issue for them as we come into a new electoral term, as it were. And actually that links nicely to say that Keir Starmer, I think, has kept Sadiq Khan sweet because he can see that his position is fragile. I think you've got people like Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, for example, thinking, hang on a minute, maybe his position isn't quite so tenable. Is immigration the main reason you left the Conservative Party?
It's certainly the breach of promise, I think. Immigration was the area where the breach of promise was greatest. But how long on programmes like this, David, did we discuss the Rwanda scheme? The Rwanda scheme was about stopping illegal crossings across the channel, and I think it was probably not going to work. But putting that to one side, what was happening all the time that illegal migration was being discussed, the government was letting legal migration rise to nearly 900,000 in one particular year. And they could have controlled that with a stroke of the pen. And I left the Conservative Party for a combination of reasons. But that deceit, that fundamental deceit that they were saying one thing, they got Brexit delivered on the promise of controlling immigration, they won elections on the promise of controlling immigration, but they let it spin out of control. And it's changed our country in fundamental ways. It's put pressure on house prices and public services. I just felt I couldn't any longer support a party that was responsible for that.
And I think it's worth highlighting since 2010 that we've had 3.7 million people coming to this country. That's more than the population of Wales, 8 cities the size of Liverpool. And you mentioned houses there. There's a demand for 120,000 new homes every single year. Well, the government has pledged to build more homes, but they also, the successive governments, have failed to build the houses they say they would build. And even if you take them at face value, and they're going to build, say, 300,000 homes a year, which I don't think they will never be able to build enough houses to accommodate the sheer numbers of people coming to this country legally.
Absolutely. And I think we do need more houses because we've got an ageing population. People don't get married like they used to. Family formation is different. So we need new houses. So I would support house building, but only when we get immigration under control. What is the point in building, so many extra houses when we don't control our borders? And it's both of the main parties are guilty of exactly the same. And the British, that number you just quoted, David, 3.7 million people, more people than Wales. The British people never, ever, ever gave their consent to that. In fact, they asked for the opposite. Politicians promised the opposite. And if you're looking for a way of people losing faith in democracy and politics, it's policies like that.
So we have a Labour government which is intent on having bloated government, more civil service. This is a traditional trope of the Labour Party. But also we're seeing the rise of the public sector here. We're seeing the decimation of the SME. We've seen the attack on the farmers. We've seen the attack on the WASPy women, for example. Yep. Now, in terms of the public sector, there's another big story, and I want your comment on it. Public sector workers are 3 times more likely to take mental health sick days than those in the private sector. Are you surprised?
I'm not, I'm afraid. And just joining the two things that you've been talking about together, Labour are obsessed with diversity, but it's a very narrow definition of diversity. They're worried about your skin colour, your gender, your sexuality. But what we know about this government is, in terms of diversity, like running a business, or having private sector experience, people I know business people, I've run a small business myself briefly, you worry at the end of the month about meeting the payroll. You know, things like that keep you awake at night. It forces you to innovate. It forces you to work that extra in a few hours, because if you're responsible for paying someone at the end of the month and you're worried you can't, you do everything to try and change that. There's no one really at the top of this government who's had that sort of pressure. They are nearly all public sector, union, politics by background. They don't understand how the economy works. And so what you get is you get the taxes of the kind that you've described, and also you get a management of the public sector where people are able to get away with forms of behaviour that the private sector couldn't afford to tolerate. And mental health problems are very real. I'm not for a moment saying they're not, but the scale of people saying they have mental health problems in the public sector just doesn't seem real to me. And the idea that work in the public sector is harder than people who get up early to do construction work or deliver for our supermarkets or work in our supermarkets, I just don't believe that the scale of mental health problems we're seeing in the public sector is at all justified.
Tim, always good to talk to you. I wish you a very happy new year. Tim Montgomery, their former number 10 advisor and founder of Conservative Home. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking about puberty blockers. This is for under 18s. Those people with gender dysphoria will be banned indefinitely in the United Kingdom after experts warned of an unacceptable safety risk. I'm going to be talking to Amy Gallagher, who's an ex-NHS nurse. She worked at the Tavistock, which will be absolutely intriguing. She's also a commentator at the New Culture Forum. That's all still to come. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
Well, no, this is the conductors on the west side of the Pennines. They don't have to work on Sundays, and as increasingly they've shown, they really don't want to work on a Sunday, and why should they? You know, those are the rules. That's what they agreed to. And you would.
Well, I mean, that's another conversation as to why should they? I mean, if I was running the railway, they'd be working every day I asked them to work, frankly.
Well, we are all looking forward to the day when you are running the railways, and indeed the rest of the country, Mark.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 821, Tuesday, December the 31st. I'm David Bull. This is Morning Glory on New Year's Eve, the last day of the year. Lots of messages coming in. Tony Addison, good morning to you. You've messaged me to say, David, honours have always been used to buy loyalty to the one who dished it out, or the promise of one in the future. And that was because I said that I wondered whether Starmer had given the honour to Sadiq Khan to keep him sweet, because I think Starmer's position is looking increasingly ropey as he goes into the new year. As we said, the mega poll, which was published a couple of days ago, shows an enormous decimation of the number of seats that Labour would hold. Now, of course, that is the largest poll that's been done since they came into power, but I imagine there are those people like Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Sadiq Khan himself, all with eyes on that top job. So how much of this is implicated in the fact that Sadiq Khan got an honour? Many of you getting in touch about this honours system and whether the right people have actually been honoured. Let me know your thoughts on that, please. Should Sadiq Khan have been knighted, a man who has presided over the decimation of a once great city, the Ulez, for example, renaming the overground line, spaffing £7 million on that, as if London doesn't have enough problems. Also, the decimation of the nightlife. The nighttime czar, that didn't work out either, did it? And yet Sadiq Khan is rewarded with a knighthood. The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Let me know all of your thoughts on that, please. Let's turn our attention now to a story that has been huge this year. This is about puberty blockers for under 18s. Well, an emergency ban will now stay in place for the foreseeable future after independent medical experts warned of the safety risk to children. This is about puberty blockers being given to kids under 18s, those with gender dysphoria. They will be banned indefinitely in the UK. Experts are warning of unacceptable safety risks. And this is on the back of the Cass Review, if you remember, a really semblant report surrounding the methodology at clinics like the Tavistock Clinic. Well, joining me now is Amy Gallagher, who's an ex-NHS nurse at the Tavistock and a commentator at the New Culture Forum. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just really, really interesting to talk to you, because I felt at the time the Cass report was so important. It was so well considered. I felt the findings of that report to be very important, and also just in terms of the advice and the guidance going forward, I thought it was actually groundbreaking.
Yeah, it was, of course, a very important review. It took many years, over 10 years of whistleblowers pushing against this ideology at the Tavistock and elsewhere for the government to bring about that review. And of course it was a huge game changer. But it's only the first time, I mean, it's only this year as we go into 2025 actually, that no children will be given these drugs, these puberty blockers, which have been, available and being prescribed for, for around 20 years now. Yeah. And there was no evidence for them. Never any evidence. I mean, this is a remarkable story of a medical scandal, really. And I guess, it's a very wonderful thing that it's ended and it's come to an end and children will be safeguarded and not given these drugs. But I guess we all need to think about why it took so long for it to go on like this.
Well, you worked at the Tavistock, and of course what the Cass Review said, and you are right in that, saying that it was all built on shaky evidence. It was ideology over clinical evidence. We as clinicians also, our first rule is first do no harm. It was clear that what was going on at the Tavistock was unacceptable and it breached medical ethics.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They put ideology before medicine, before evidence. The Tavistock were very influenced by activist organisations like Stonewall and Mermaids. These are charities that are based about advocating for a particular belief system, as opposed to any links to medicine or knowledge in that sense. But they felt pressured by these activist organisations to, for example, reduce the age in which people could take puberty blockers and to administer them more liberally. liberally. There was a hell of a lot of bullying that went on for a very, very long time over this. And the downside is that children have been harmed. We talk about woke ideology and things like this as though they can be quite silly and we can make fun of it sometimes. But the outcome of this is that children, often gay children, autistic children who've had experienced trauma, their bodies and their lives have been damaged forever. This is very serious. To me, it's one of the biggest medical scandals of our lifetime. And although it's good, it's great news that the puberty blockers are now banned, I think that all of the medical institutions now need to take a long period of time to think and try to understand how this happened. And my worry is that they're not going to.
And that's what Cass said. She said the causes for wanting to change gender are complex trauma, neglect, abuse, low self-esteem, as you point out. Also, I think it's worth pointing out, of course, children's brains are still developing. Maturation is still taking place. So children are just trying to find their way in the world. Now, Victoria Atkins, it was one of the government's last acts. They said no new patients under 18 would be given them if they were experiencing gender dysphoria. So that has obviously been carried on. This emergency ban is going to stay in place. Now, Wes Streeting is also saying he's going to set up new gender identity services for young people. How do you feel about that?
My worry is that the whole of the medical establishment and mental health in general is kind of signalling out that this notion of gender. And we still have this idea as though it's something very specific that needs to be dealt with by experts. But the point is what Cass revealed and what many clinicians have pointed out is that the feeling of wanting to change sex or wanting to change your body really is about underlying issues to do with, as we've said, trauma or self-esteem or just depression or anxiety. And these are things that can be dealt with in any mental health institution or with any kind of therapist. And I do worry that we still kind of are putting this idea of gender on a pedestal and saying this is something very special that needs to be looked at in a very different way to the way we look at any other mental health issue. And it's not. It's no different from feeling like you want to change your body in any other way. It's linked to all the same things. So I don't know what this kind of new gender treatment will look like. I mean, it should be really just therapy, talking therapy, CBT therapy, and giving the patient a long time to try to understand why they feel the way they do and how they can go about changing the way they feel about themselves and their body.
Now, obviously, one of the people who's been campaigning very vigorously on this is J.K. Rowling, and she has had a very important role to play in this. She has waded into another argument saying no child is born in the wrong body. This is the latest intervention on trans issues. She says there are no trans kids, only adults believing in an ideology that will end up wreaking more harm than lobotomies. And this is in response to someone who posted to her on X. She said there are adults like you prepared to sacrifice the health of minors to bolster your belief in an ideology that will end up wreaking more harm than lobotomies and false memory syndrome combined. I just don't understand why there are these activists, these players who are so intent on corrupting the minds of young people, vulnerable young people.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, while puberty blockers are being banned, gender ideology is still absolutely rife in our institutions, unfortunately, and there are still many activist organisations that are pushing it. As J.K. Rowling said, it's absolutely correct that nobody is born in the wrong body, but there are many people that believe that. While you can feel that you're in the wrong body, the idea that you actually are is, to me, a religious belief system. You're saying that there is some kind of God, and the God decided to put you in the wrong body. None of it makes sense. When you try to challenge these ideas, they never have any answers, and they just defer to dogma. There's still people that it's almost functioning to me like a cult at this point. Some of these activists, they've believed in it for so long that it's very hard to let go of, particularly if they know someone or if they have a child that has gone through some kind of transition surgery. It'd be very, very hard to admit that you've made a mistake in that instance. It's devastating to think that you were led on by an ideology and went on to change your body or supported a friend or a family member in changing their body. So I think the repercussions of all of this are going to be seen for many, many years to come, and there's people that are not going to want to let go of this ideology.
There is another story this morning about transgender women. This is in the Daily Mail. Almost 2/3 of transgender women in prisons who are legally men, so they are phenotypically women, but they're genotypically men. Almost 2/3 of them have been convicted of sex offences. Some 151 of the 245 trans women in prison have been convicted of at least one sexual offence. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, many of these male prisoners, it should be said, they don't even have a gender recognition certificate.
Indeed.
They haven't gone through what's known as transgender surgery. They are literally just saying, all of a sudden, I am a woman, or I want to dress as a woman. And I think there's two things going on here. There's men who just realise that they can game the system by saying they're trans. They think they'll be treated more sympathetically, more compassionately. They may even be transferred to a women's prison, and they just think, well, it's in my interest to say that I'm trans and dress as a woman. And then there are these men who are sexual predators who maybe have always enjoyed dressing as a woman, and it's part of their sexual fetish. Maybe they have autogynephilia, or maybe they just enjoy the feeling of being able to control a woman, and of course that links into their crimes. That's why they commit crimes, sexual assaults against women, and the fact that their sexual fetish, which is part of their predatory behaviour, is being treated as though it's, in quotes, trans or some kind of identity that we should have sympathy for, when actually it's part of their criminality, is extremely worrying. And to me it's not surprising actually that there is such a difference between the rates of men that say they're trans in terms of going on to commit sexual assault, because the two are obviously linked. If you're willing to break the boundaries of sexual differences, you're willing to break boundaries elsewhere in relation to other people's bodies and what you do and how you view them.
Very good to hear from you, Amy. I wish you a very happy New Year. Amy Gallagher there, ex-NHS nurse at the Tavistock and commentator at the New Culture Forum, talking about the puberty blockers for under-18s to be banned indefinitely. We were also talking about the honours system. There's a whole list of them in many of the papers this morning. What do you think about the honours system? Sadiq Khan is the one that stands out in many of the papers. Gareth Southgate also. Your thoughts on all of that, please. 0344 499 1000. Claire has sent a voice note to us about the honour system and about knighthoods. Good morning.
I'm afraid this knighthood for failure is just a proof of Labour ideology and a failure of such, but in a microcosm. London is the start of a rollout for this country, and Khan is a disgrace. Let's just wait and see how Labour ruins our country. Thank you.
Very strong, Claire. Wish you a very happy New Year as well. Lots of other messages on this. Jenny in Oxford. David, no honour should be awarded just for doing your salary job. That would stop all these wasters getting honours and clean up the honours system themselves. Kev Mears in Shropshire. Good morning to you. Happy New Year to you. David, the honours system is irrelevant to most of us. It's just a club for the establishment. It's proof they're out of touch. Nigel Farage could have been made a lord and would have been less of a thorn in the establishment side. Very glad he wasn't. But that proves how out of touch and how incompetent they all are. We also were talking about mental health earlier. This is Gertie. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. Happy New Year. I'm a sufferer from mental health issues and depression, but I still go to work. I become tearful and so on, but I have to go to work to pay my mortgage and my bills. Today's society is the result of the nanny state, where people will use any excuse to take time off work, and how mental health is now the new trend. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. After the break, we're going to be talking about the latest US news. Joe Biden apparently still believes he could have beaten Donald Trump if he'd stayed in the election race. I'm going to be talking to Adam Coleman, who's a columnist at the New York Post. That's all still to come. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 8:37. Sadiq Khan gets a knighthood. Your thoughts, please, this morning on that. A reward for failure. I'm just reflecting, actually, on what Sadiq Khan has done to London since he got into power. I think the capital is pretty unrecognisable, actually, in terms of its makeup, in terms of the way it works or doesn't work, the nightlife, the transport infrastructure. It's also really expensive to get around in London as well. Let's just look at his accolades, shall we? Let's start with crime. Well, since he succeeded Boris Johnson in 2016, knife crime itself has increased by more than 50%. Violent crime has soared in the capital. Violent crime has soared 30% from 190,000 incidents in 2016 when he first came to power to 250,000 this past year. That is not a definition of success. When you look at the capital's roads, now remember we had the congestion charge imposed upon us, also the Ulez, which has been pushed through despite massive opposition. And in fact, when you look at some of those elections, the by-elections that took place, it was based on the Ulez. The capital's roads, despite the congestion charge, despite Ulez, are the most congested in Europe still, so it hasn't worked. It's the third worst in the world. This is according to the INRIX Global Trafficking Scorecard for 2023. The average delay on major A roads and motorways across Greater London has shot up by a quarter since 2021. That's according to the Department for Transport's own figures. It now stands at 15.9 seconds per mile travelled. One of the other big bugbears I have is about the demise of nightlife in London. The number of pubs, bars and clubs holding 24-hour alcohol licence has fallen by 2/3 in 2 years, from 183 to 58. 58 in March 2024 across the whole of London. Also, I mentioned Amy Lame, of course. She was the Night Tsar, which I think sounds like a great job. The one job where you are there to make sure nightlife prospers in the capital. One of the biggest problems, as many of you will know if you've been out and about in London, is you can't get home because public transport stops far too early. She was paid 130 grand to make sure that nightlife prospered, and as we saw, the number of the pubs, bars and clubs holding those 24-hour alcohol licensing dropped significantly. She left her role. She hasn't been replaced. Also, let's look at taxes in London. This is the mayoral precept. That is charged to people who live in London on top of their council tax as well, goes into the kitty for various projects, and his precept has increased by an average of just under 7%. So the cost per household has gone from £276, that was in 2016. This year, £471. Where on earth is that going? Now, one of the biggest things that happened this year was the pushback, the fight back against Ulez. Sadiq Khan took very sorely to this. He did not like it one bit. Let's have a look at the clip of him calling the anti-Ulez protesters far right and Tory.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group. Let's be frank. Let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers. And some are Tories.
Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Concentrate on the day job, Sadiq Khan. What do you think? He got a knighthood. Was that the right decision? Why did Starmer do that? Is it to reward failure? Is it to keep his friends close and his enemies closer still? Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Now, let's talk about matters in the United States, because Joe Biden, as we know, stepped down and obviously wasn't in the presidential race, but he still believes he could have beaten Donald Trump if he'd stayed in the US election. What exactly is he smoking? Joining me now, Adam Coleman, columnist at the New York Post. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I know it's New Year's Eve as well. Joe Biden thinks he could have beaten Donald Trump. Is he delusional?
No, he's not delusional. He's just egotistical.
Right.
I mean, that's always been Joe Biden's issue. He has hubris about him, even though he's literally falling apart and everybody can watch it. But it doesn't surprise me that he feels this way. I've been saying from the very beginning, he never actually wanted to leave this race. He was forced to leave this race. I don't know what they held over his head to get him to drop out and realize that he should drop out. But they did it. And I think he's always felt some sort of resentment. Clearly, there was an issue between him and the Kamala Harris camp. He really wasn't brought out on the campaign trail for Kamala. They saw him as a liability more than an asset. And so none of this actually surprises me.
I mean, I think on the campaign trail, it was fair to say he was a liability. If you remember, he called the French President Emmanuel Macron Mitterrand from Germany. By the way, he died in 1996. He then mixed up Helmut Kohl. He mixed Helmut Kohl up with Angela Merkel. He also said the Egyptian leader, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, was the president of Mexico. You cannot have the leader of the free world making these huge gaffes on the world stage.
You're absolutely right. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I would even go to something as simple as the economy was the #1 issue, and #2 issue, I would say, was the immigration. And so for Kamala, she also didn't want to necessarily say that she's not part of it, but at the same time, she doesn't want to boast Joe Biden, who was part of the problem. So by her having some sort of separation from him, at least visually, which is also part of her campaign's confusion, because in one moment she says, I supported everything, I was in the room, and, you know, in the next moment she doesn't want Joe Biden there.
Yeah,
even though she's
I was in the room, and then I wasn't in the room. I'm not quite sure where I was. But also, when Harris was campaigning, I was just really struck. She looked drunk half the time.
I mean, I don't know. I think for her, she wasn't ready for this stage. You know, this is something where anyone who was actually going to win this presidential election, outside of Joe Biden, you told him you're going to run for president and you have a few months to win. No one would actually sign up for it. So I think she was destined to lose, because it is a huge feat. There's a reason why we have our elections as long as they are. People have to get to know you. You have to get built for a campaign, a presidential campaign. And I just don't think she had it. And I think she was also set up to fail, because people are going to associate Joe Biden with Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris with Joe Biden. Like, you can't get away from that. And she didn't know how to answer those particular questions about the economy and immigration when she's strongly linked to it, while at the same time acknowledging that there was a problem. So it was a very confusing issue for her to get over.
And of course, Donald Trump really won an unprecedented mandate. He's hit the ground running. He's brought in people like Elon Musk. Actually, it's quite interesting who he has appointed. He's gone to leaders in business, for example. This is his second attempt at this, his second term in this. It will be fascinating to see what happens. He certainly, from our perspective, looks like he's hitting the ground running. The DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, were headed by Elon Musk. I mean, what is the sentiment, particularly in New York, actually, which tends to be hugely democratic?
I think a lot of people are seeing this as business friendly. You know, I look at stuff where Jeff Bezos was very open to the idea of working alongside Donald Trump, which is something that caught me off guard. But I think there's a different vibe as far as how Donald Trump is moving, and I'll even say this: he hasn't really spoken a lot. He's put out a tweet here or there, or a post here or there on True Social, but he hasn't really been talking a lot. It sounds like he's been doing a lot of things. He's been acting as the president. He's technically not the president yet, and I think that is actually a very good sign. He's not getting caught up in the nonsense that happens in political discourse. He's actually working, and I think after his assassination attempt, he seems calmer, and he seems more driven to actually have some sort of change. And him going to business leaders and trying to shrink our debt or trying to become more efficient, I think is a very positive sign. It's unique.
Adam, I wish you a very happy new year. Thanks ever so much for talking to us this morning. That's Adam Coleman there, columnist at the New York Post. We'll take a break. After the break, I want to concentrate on the BBC. Do you think the BBC has had its worst year yet? Huge scandals rocking the BBC, calls for the licence fee to be scrapped from many quarters, actually. I'll be talking to Roger Bolton, who's a former BBC executive. Has it lost its way? Does it still conform to those Reithian principles of informing, educating and entertaining? Is it time to say goodbye to the BBC? That's all still to come. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Good morning, 8:51, Tuesday, December the 31st, New Year's Eve. A very good morning to you. Lots of messages coming in. Francis from Wilton, good morning. David, where is your Christmas waistcoat? Please wear it. You were wearing them in Advent. And by the way, Christmas runs until January the 5th. Told you, Ted. Though your waistcoats could continue in some Christian communities within the Anglican Festival of Light, which is Candlemas, ending at the end of January. Ooh, good. End of January, I can carry on wearing them. Before we eagerly await Lent and then celebrate the resurrection of our Lord on Easter Day. So, despite your producer, do give us a more colourful day in what is a bleak outlook. Well said. I may don said waistcoat in just a minute. Ted will be thrilled. Sharon, good morning to you. Happy New Year, Dr. Bull. Keep up the good work. And you have to wear your waistcoat, please, Sharon, in Staffordshire, you see. I see all this support for a waistcoat. Anyway, keep all those messages coming in. Also, based on the New Year's honours list, just in terms of that, lots of the papers covering that this morning. Prime Minister Knight's Calm Inner Award for failure. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222, please. Keep all of those messages coming in. Right, let's turn our attention to the BBC now, shall we? Because there has been an awful lot of criticism about the BBC, about its failure to act, the governance over the BBC. It's obviously had to deal with a snap election, a change of government, a new Tory leader as well. Also, a change in political direction. There are lots of calls for the BBC to be defunded. Has the BBC actually lost its way? It seems to me that it doesn't seem to understand public sentiment very well, and it lurches from one crisis to another. Well, joining me now is Roger Bolton, who's a former BBC executive. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning.
Really good to talk to you. I mean, look, the BBC has actually not had a great year, I think it's fair to say. We saw the Hugh Edwards scandal, of course. We also saw Greg Wallace biting the dust. We saw the gaffe that Laura Kuenssberg made by sending her briefing notes to Boris Johnson, and that interview was then cancelled. I think one of the biggest things, and look, I'm a big fan of the BBC when it gets things right, but it seems to me things like staff salaries, Gary Lineker, just spiralled out of control, and there was very little governance.
Well, where should we start? And by the way, I don't represent the BBC.
No, indeed, but you did work there.
Right, but anyway, are the BBC getting anything right? Well, they got Christmas pretty well right, didn't they?
Did they?
Look at Wolf Hall, look at Gavin and Stacey, looking at Outnumbered, looking at the coverage of Carol from Kings. I mean, that's all pretty good. Now, obviously, what's been happening across the industry is a real financial crisis. The BBC's finances back down in real value terms of spending power by over 30 to 35%. So they've had to cut back quite dramatically. Same with ITV. ITV did that wonderful programme about Mr. Bates and the Post Office. It never made its money back. So there's a general problem across the industry. Too many outlets, too little money. That's very difficult. When you get to the BBC, you know, when the country's divided, that somebody said in the past, the BBC's on the rack because it has to represent all the country, and nobody's particularly happy with it. It's had a bad year, not a terrible year. It has got a new chairman. It is trying, I think, genuinely to improve its coverage. And look at what it's doing in the coverage of Syria and the Middle East now. I think that's superb. But I think the crucial thing is this. We shouldn't be talking in this next year or two with the BBC's charter coming up about the BBC. We should start by saying, is there a role for public service media anymore? If there is, if we want it, is the BBC the best way of delivering it? And then how do we pay for it? So don't start with the licence fee. Start with, what do we want it for? And I would say, and I support public service media, what about children's programmes?
Well, we will talk about children's programmes, actually, because obviously Rowena Benjamin has waded in. She's also said that children's programming has lost its way. I would agree with that. I worked in children's programming at the BBC. I worked on Newsround, which was the only news programme for children.
Well, but also, let me start on that. First of all, congratulations for you on Newsround.
Well, thank you very much.
Secondly, that you will know that the BBC still produces most, if not all, of the original children's programming. The problem is across the industry and elsewhere, and the too great a dependence on American cartoons and elsewhere. So what we need a conversation with the BBC's future is to say, right, BBC, if you're going to continue to exist, one of the key things you need to deliver are children's programming, original children's program. Nobody else is doing it particularly. Right, go and do that. That's a priority for you. I think there needs to be a public debate about what we want from public service and then decide how to deliver it. Now, I would say in the end, the BBC is worth supporting, and the licence fee is increasingly difficult to support because it's regressive. But you look at all the alternatives, it's difficult. For example, if you took advertising, It put you out of business and others out of business, and the rest of the industry is saying, please don't make the BBC take advertising, it'll destroy us. There are lots of problems with every way you pay for it.
But hang on a minute, isn't the issue here about core services? I think the BBC has made a couple of huge mistakes. One is merging international and domestic news. I have no interest in some of the stories they're now peddling. So, for example, we know that the news output has changed. BBC Verify has not worked in the way that they hoped it would do. And also, I just wonder, are they spreading everything too thinly? Why don't they concentrate on core services, which essentially is how the BBC was founded?
Well, I would say that I agree with a great deal of that. I don't agree actually with what you're saying about news, but I do agree about spreading things too thinly. What the BBC has tried to do is accommodate this reduction in income by slicing everything. And I think you've gone as far as you can. And I think now that's why I argue for a public debate about what are the core services you want the BBC to deliver. But I do believe one of those core services is news. I do believe...
No, I do too. But I want to see more domestic news. What they've done is they've actually watered down the offering.
I think there's always been well, I think they've had to cut back, inevitably. But I think where another point is true is that I don't think they've reported this country in all its complexity in the way they've reported the rest of the world. And I think in Brexit and in the general election, you could see that the BBC news coverage was a little bit out of touch with the rest of the country. I think that needs to be adjusted. But do we want public service? By heaven, we do. Look what they're doing in the States. Look what we're getting. Look what we're getting from social media. We need someone we can trust. We need an organisation we can trust. We need an organisation that will say, for our children, we want good children's programmes. We want to have science programmes. We want to have things about engineering. We want to have a place where everybody can talk and feel free to say what they think.
What would you say to people who say, well, look, if the offering is so good, why don't we then turn to a subscription model?
Because if you go to subscription, maybe up to 5 million people will be switched off because they don't have direct access. If everybody was online, that might be an option. But the problem also is, with subscription, is the money tends to go where the majority of viewers are or listeners are. That's what tends to happen. And you don't want a situation in which we have lots of one sorts of programs. And by the way, Netflix and Apple and everything else are doing wonderful programs, but of a type. We want to say, if public service, what about the other areas? What about the room for experimentation? What about writers? Where can they go if they want to start writing? Are the BBC going to help? Where could people trial comedy? I mean, one of the great shames of the last few years has been BBC 4 and BBC 2, where you could have comedies tried out if they work for BBC 1, have gone. So let's have the debate and then decide how we pay for it and whether the BBC is the right organisation.
Roger, always good to talk to you. Thanks for your time and Happy New Year. Roger Bolton, their former BBC executive. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Isabel Oakeshott about the latest goings-on in politics and, of course, the knighthood debate rumbles on. We'll talk more about that here on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
The Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Tuesday, December the 31st. Of course, it is New Year's Eve, the last day of the year. A very happy New Year to you wherever you are. Hope you're all prepared for this evening. Lots of you getting in touch telling me what you're going to be doing. Also, it's New Year, of course, and that means it's the New Year's honours list has been announced. Well, it's not gone down very well, or certain appointments haven't gone down very well. The Daily Telegraph this morning, PM Sadiq Khan in reward for failure. Some of the other papers also using exactly the same terminology, saying that it is a reward for failure. We're also talking about Gareth Southgate this morning as well. This is the front page of the Mirror. Lots of other papers as well saying that we shouldn't be rewarding failure. What do you think about that? Should Sadiq Khan actually have been given a knighthood? The number 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Alex in Birmingham now. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, David.
Your thoughts this morning?
Oh, okay. Well, Sadiq Khan should not have got a knighthood, that's one thing. But I was ringing up about the TV licence.
Yes.
And the way the way that's fueled, the way that it happens, it's like it's an institution that's been there since time. I would like to see it preserved, but by subscription. But I don't think the law should be on the side of the BBC to be able to force people to pay £171 a year just for programmes they may not even wish to see or watch, or for an institution that has showed bias politically as well.
I mean, I think it's anachronistic, isn't it? But let's just go back to this idea of subscription, which I put to Roger Bolton and said, look, if it's so good, let's have a subscription model, because Netflix works very well. His riposte is that the BBC then would only make shows which are deemed to be commercially successful. They wouldn't make science, they wouldn't make children's programmes, they wouldn't make news. Sky News loses money, for example.
Well, I think it comes down to choice. I mean, if they've got subscription, they have an option still to do what they do with the funding they get from subscription. So they can still make these TV programmes. They can still be that. But, I mean, they came along at a time when we were revolutionising the way we shared information, and part of them programmes are a part of that history. But when I look at the licence fee, it's archaic. It reminds me of when you used to hear stories of kingdoms that taxed people for having windows. Yeah. It's an abuse. And if you look at the way that it's funded, they use that funding to also go to court and pay for their legal fees to chase down people that couldn't afford to pay the licence fee, but only maybe had a TV as their only outlet of stress and entertainment. And they may not even be watching the BBC still, but they forcibly must pay that licence. I think there's an element of it that feels like it's unethical and slightly a bit of an abuse, really, on the people.
You mentioned something else about integrity, or at least it's sort of excelling in journalism. I'm paraphrasing slightly here. My concern is that in the cutbacks, what they've done is they keep paying these presenters ridiculous sums of money, like Gary Lineker, for example. I don't believe any presenter is worth that kind of money. But at the same time, they've managed to merge domestic and international news, and I think it's become this kind of amorphous blob of nothingness. It doesn't have the resonance it once did.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it felt like it was a truly British institution, it gave us a sense of being centred in your own country that supported who you are culturally or traditionally as well. But now, like you say, it's so broadly, it's placed in the way that it reports, and not calling Hamas a terrorist organisation is ridiculous. I think that the BBC have offended the British public, but still, when you think about it, if they fail the same as the way Sadiq Khan failed, they still forcibly get that licence fee by law. And it's under an act called Communications Act. Well, communication is a two-way street. They're not. They're just broadcasters. So there's a lot really that's archaic about it that could be delved into, but I don't think we should be forced to pay. I think there's a place for them, but I think it's subscription in modern day.
Alex, really good to talk to you. Happy New Year, Alex there in Birmingham. Right, let's move on. Let's talk about this front page, about the honours system, about Sadiq Khan being given a knighthood. Is it a reward for failure? Well, joining me now is Isabel Oakeshott, who's Talk's international editor. Happy New Year to you, Isabel.
Good morning. I'm genuinely trying to work out what exactly Sadiq Khan is being rewarded for.
Knife crime.
Right, yeah, and the brilliant state of our once magnificent capital city that literally everybody you talk to about says they are now increasingly worried about the state of quite flagrant crime on the streets, how dirty it's become. You talk to people from abroad who've come here or haven't been to London for a few years and have come recently, and they're shocked by the state of our streets. So I just don't know. If you want to discredit the honours system, if you want to actively go out of your way to raise questions about the way the honours system is used, how about giving Sadiq Khan a knighthood?
And it's not just about knife crime or feeling less safe on the streets. I'm also very mindful of the traffic, for example, the introduction of Ulez against many people's wishes. That's why we saw other political parties doing well in certain outer boroughs of London. We've also seen traffic crawling to a halt, the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour zones, the decimation of nightlife. I actually think that's one of the biggest tragedies of London, is that we aren't seeing the pubs, the bars, the restaurants staying open late and having those alcohol licences. In fact, he has presided over the death of nightlife in London.
It's such a shocking, tragic, wasted opportunity, because London is still one of the greatest capital cities on the planet. It has so much potential, and every time I'm tempted to talk it down, I look around me and I see the fundamentals. No other capital city has the spectacular Houses of Parliament on the Thames, has all that history. There are so many bits to London. If you're a tourist, most cities are quite hard to sustain as a tourist for, you can really not fill in more than 2 or 3 days maximum. I reckon London, you could be in London as a tourist for 10 days and still not be bored. And yet we let ourselves down, or rather, he lets us down. For example, the Houses of Parliament aren't fully lit up at night. So many other iconic buildings are not actually shown off at their best. And there is so much more that we could do. And instead, he pours money into silly woke initiatives and endless posters around Vauxhall talking about pride and, diversity and so on. And it just isn't showing off our city at its best.
Just in terms of his knighthood, how much of this is Starmer watching his back, do you think? Because I think Khan's got his eye on the top job. He'll be opening his little book of contacts, wondering who would support him.
Well, if Sadiq Khan wanted to go for the top job, I know that every other opposition party would be delighted, because a less inspirational, politically threatening figure is hard to imagine. If Labour wants to swap one utterly mediocre performer for one that's on the same level, then, go right ahead, knock yourselves out, install Sadiq Khan. So I don't know, really. Is Sadiq Khan much competition? Maybe changing demographics mean that he might be competition for Starmer. But I would say that opposition parties would say, bring that on.
I mean, I think one thing that Sadiq Khan has is he's an incredibly divisive politician. He panders to certain minority groups where he knows he gets the bloc vote. And I think some of the things that he said are frankly downright dangerous and outrageous. Let's have a look at and remind ourselves about him and what he said about those people who were anti-Ulez, those protesters. He said they were far right. Have a look.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group. Let's be frank. Let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers, and some are Tories.
I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable, Isabel.
You know, every time politicians are stupid enough to smear large swathes of ordinary, law-abiding, decent people with these sorts of labels, I think good luck to you. You know, you might have got away with this for some years, but things are changing. And if politicians like him go on using this lazy characterisation of anybody who disagrees with them, anyone who actually dares question their crazed agenda, calling them far right, well, there are going to be repercussions for that politically, and we're already seeing it in the huge shifts in support for political parties right across. You know, the hegemony of the two traditional parties is falling away, and it's because leaders like that continue to insult ordinary people.
Let's talk about also changing political situations. This is an article in The Telegraph about Blair opening the borders. This is about 2004 and the accession of 8 Eastern European countries into the European Union. And it transpires that Tony Blair was being advised. Very significant advisors were saying, look, you need to have a transition zone on this. You can't have unfettered access to the United Kingdom from countries like the Czech Republic and Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia. David Blunkett was the one that says, actually, you need to open the borders to allow them in. We need to rely on cheap labour. They got the figures woefully wrong. They said 13,000 people would come here. They were wrong. They were enormously wrong by tenfold, more than tenfold. It went up to 200,000.
And yet, when you cite those figures, 200,000 people who actually, vast majority of whom at that time did come here to work and build new lives, and actually did so quite successfully and integrated quite nicely, those figures absolutely pale into insignificance now, don't they, relative to the complete uncontrolled influx that we've had in recent years. I mean, it's certainly true that when you look at the history, the disastrous history of mass immigration in the UK, this is where it all began. But that would have been recoverable. You know, I think many people could come up with plenty of positives about Eastern European immigration during that period. What has been an absolute disaster is the mass importing of people with low to no skills who are net dependents on the state, not net contributors.
And just finally, if I may, just talk about sickness and mental health sickness, or those people taking time off because they have a mental health problem. So there is another story this morning. Public sector workers are 3 times more likely to take mental health sick days than those in the private sector. I'd love to see how many self-employed people take days off for mental health issues.
Well, wouldn't that be interesting? I don't think that there'd be any great revelation that it'll be a vanishingly small number, because if you've got to get out of bed to earn a living, if if you're having an off day and you're feeling a bit blue and not going to work means you're not actually going to get paid that day, then it slightly alters the calculus. I think that 2025 has got to be the year that the authorities, the DWP and those in positions of power, grip this so-called mental health crisis. It is way out of control. The figures are off the charts. Of course, we always have to say this, it's boring to do it, but yes, of course, some people genuinely are very, very unwell in their mind, and it might be addiction or it might be genuine clinical depression, which is a horrible, horrible condition. But I'm afraid that there are mass numbers of people who are swinging the lead, and they are being enabled to do so by an unquestioning state, public sector employers, and an unquestioning welfare state. And we can't go on like this. You know, the broader issue of the abuse of disability benefits, which are much needed for a minority of truly unwell people who, ironically, often have to jump through far more hoops than they ought to. You know, people who've got cancer, people who are physically heavily disabled should not be made to go to hell and back to get our support. But far too many people are frankly taking the mickey, and this has got to be confronted.
Isabel, always good to talk to you. Happy New Year. Are you all sorted for later?
The entire household has been stricken by various allergies, so it's going to be a quiet one.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I hope you feel better soon, or I hope the household feels better soon. Isabel, thanks ever so much. That's Isabel Oakeshott there, Talk's international editor in a lurgy-filled house this new year. After the break, I'm going to be talking about HS2. There are real concerns that HS2 is in a very serious situation and needs a reset. That's according to the new boss. I'll be talking to Joe Rokin, who is founder of Stop HS2. That's still to come after this break.
I wonder, from your experience as a working politician, Andrea, how many constituents, when you had them, came up to you and said, "You know what? Taxes have gone up, and I think that's a really good thing. I think you know that tax that the Conservatives put on X. I think that's a really good idea. I really support that."
Obviously, business rates should be kept low. You know, you should show that Britain's open for business, and it's been proven, hasn't it? You know, the more money that people can keep themselves less in tax, then, you know, it's better for the economy. The more they're going to spend in the economy, anyways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
9:21, this is Morning Glory. I'm David Bull. Thanks ever so much for your company on this New Year's Eve. Let's talk about HS2, shall we? Apparently HS2 is in a very serious situation and needs a fundamental reset. That's according to the new boss of the company building the high-speed railway. This is a chap called Mark Wilde. He's chief executive of HS2. He says he's committed to ensuring the railway opens safely and efficiently. Now, earlier this month, HS2 Limited estimated the cost of building the railway would be between 54 and 66 billion. That is in 2019 prices. That is between 67 and 83 billion in current prices. But here's the thing. When they actually appeared in front of the Commons Public Accounts Committee, the Department of Transport's top civil servant, this is Dame Bernadette Kelly, said the figures were not reliable. Joining me now is Joe Rukin, who is founder of Stop HS2. Good morning to you. Good morning.
Morning.
So where are we in this? The fact is that HS2 has been beset by problems. It's spiralling out of control. The money seems to be hosing over HS2, and yet those figures are unreliable.
Yep, that's welcome to the last 15 years of HS2. You've got to remember that when this thing was first proposed 15 years ago, it was going to cost 32 billion, and that was going to get you from London to Manchester and Leeds. It's now maybe, well, if we're lucky, going to cost 83 to get just past Birmingham. This has been a ridiculous, idiotic project right from the outset. The thing is, you've not got to look at this as a railway. You've got to look at this as a mechanism for making the construction industry lots of money. And in that respect, it has always been a success. And that's what...
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, well, that's what this is about. HS2 was basically, 15 years ago, a load of lobbyists go to Lord Adonis and they say, you know what, we want to build the the fastest railway in the history of the world, and he just gives them the green light for it. And what we are seeing now, especially with the mess with Euston, is something that we've been saying right from the start, that what they want to get into Euston simply cannot be achieved in the space that they have taken, both in the station and both in the throats coming in. That's why we're on 7, maybe 8 different redesigns of Euston, and that's why the cost keeps going up, because what they want to achieve in that area is impossible.
Why is it impossible?
Because there simply isn't the space, because you've got all the problems with the various other things that are underground. The width of the throat to get the trains in just north of the station isn't wide enough. And
but surely in the planning of this, they would have looked at that, would they not?
No, it's been based on wishful thinking. That's why we've had 7 different redesigns of the station. That's why Rishi Sunak cancelled the link to Euston, or paused the link to Euston. And now it's been revived.
But that made no sense at all, that you would even go from Birmingham to Old Oak Common and then you have to get off a train and get on another train. You're not even in London.
Well, you've got the Elizabeth line there now, but the thing is that Old Oak Common was a bust anyway, because the problem with that is it's not designed as a terminus station, so you haven't got anywhere for the trains to sit there while they wait and turn around. So how you would have been what you would have been looking at Old Oak Common was a very, very limited service, because there's simply nowhere to put the trains, because it's designed as a through station. It's not designed as a terminus station. But this is one of the cataclysms with HS2. Well, HS2 is a cataclysm right from the start to finish, because it was designed exceptionally poorly. It was basically a map-based exercise where people just, sat in London and drew a line on the map without realising the constraints that they would face when they got out into the real world. And that's why the costs have kept going up. That's why you've had more tunnels added, because the original plan was to have an overland route through West London. They'd looked at the map and said, oh, you know what? Where the Chiltern line is through Hillingdon and Ruislip, we can stick it next to the railway there. We can have it will just take a bit of someone's back garden. And then we realise, oh, you know what? We'll need the house. And you know what? We'll need the road as well. And we'll need the house on the other side of the road. So then eventually they decide they're going to tunnel it. And that's why the costs keep going up, because of the inbuilt design errors that were there right from the start, but no one cared about, because the thing is, when the costs go up, the people building it they get more money. And that's what this has always been about.
I mean, strong decision-making would have said right at the beginning, if it was going over budget and if it wasn't feasible, we can it. They didn't do that. They've ploughed more and more money in. There are 31,000 people employed on this project, 350 active construction sites. As you say, there are 227 viaducts and bridges. And that reminds me, there's also this nonsense about the Bat Tunnel, if you recall this, the 100 million quid Bat Tunnel designed to protect bats. Turns out it's not even bat-proof.
No, well, this is how it... Well, we're looking at... There's been issues with various actual viaducts as well that we're not sure that they've had to do remedial work on the actual viaducts, that they've built them wrong and they've had to start again, or, well, not start again, but make adjustments as they've gone along. And the whole thing's been a mess from start to finish.
So let's have a look at where we are. So
to make money.
So there are 55 miles of twin-bore tunnels. So they've done 38 of them. 58% of engineering work has been done. That is just preparing the ground, by the way. That's not even... Yeah, that's only preparing the ground. Also, they have started constructing 158 out of 227 viaducts and bridges. Now that we're in this position, what would you do now if you were in charge? Would you still can it?
To be honest, absolutely. Because the thing is, it's still going to... Not only is it still going to go up in costs, but this thing is never going to make money. This is going to mean an ongoing subsidy for something that only benefits the richest in society. So it means...
Why would it benefit the richest in society? They'll fly, won't they?
No one flies from London to Birmingham. It's saturated by the rail market already. Like you go to Birmingham International Airport, and around there, the villages around Hampton and Arden, it's a Solihull stockbroker belt.
Yeah.
People commute in from Birmingham International. All right, maybe not commute. Maybe they live there at the weekends and they go to the city in the week, but. You have rail has saturation in that market. This is something that's only going to ever benefit the richest in society. They talk about to try and con the public. People now say, "Oh, it's going to free up all this capacity." Well, no, it's not, because you can only take a couple of trains off the existing lines to make up for HS2. Because, there's only so many trains that go from London to Birmingham. There's only so many trains that go from London to Manchester. Those are the ones that you could maybe remove. But, of course, those existing trains stop at other stations between London and Birmingham. So you were reducing those services, say, for example, the London service to Coventry or the Birmingham service to Coventry, which is, a massive deal locally in the local economy. And again, Wolverhampton would suffer potentially as well, if you're looking at, say, the Midlands. Now, when you do that, you are reducing the service for quotidian commuting, or the small inter-urban journeys that the vast majority of people do. And you are spending that money on something that is only going to benefit the richest in society. And because of the subsidy that HS2 will need, because it is never going to make money, because it will never attract the grossly inflated passenger forecasts were used to justify its construction. Because of that, then you will see cuts in the existing railway, or you'll see promises that cannot be fulfilled in the existing railway, because the money is going to keep going into HS2 and the rest of the network will suffer. So you've got to look at it in those terms. People don't think about just the cost of running this thing as well as the cost of building it. And those costs are going to keep going up, and the environmental damage is far, far too great, because it's been designed for such a high speed. And if you stop now, those areas will recover.
Joe, really good to talk to you. Happy New Year to you. Joe Rukin there, founder of Stop HS2. Lots of messages coming in. Happy New Year, David. The New Year's honours list is just another corrupt arm of the deep establishment that is brazenly out of touch and out of kilter with public opinion. The system is a mutual backslapping society, all greedily feeding from the public sector trough. My view of them could not get any lower or more contemptible. That is Alan in Middlesbrough. Let's take a break. After the break, we'll talk about New Year's Eve, of course. It is New Year's Eve. Hogmanay, very sadly, all the big celebrations up in Scotland have been cancelled as a result of the weather. We are expecting some very inclement weather, particularly high winds. Yellow alerts have been issued across most of the country, I believe. But I'll tell you what, Claire Nazir has more on that. She will join us after this break. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, I'm getting ready in the spirit, of course, for tonight, the final day of 2024, the beginning of 2025. Sean, good morning to you in Warwickshire. Good morning, David. I love the suit. You're really rocking it. I've taken it off now. I would love to visit your wardrobe. Crikey. Happy New Year to you. Thanks very much for all your messages. Lots of you getting in contact about the honours system. I'm asking, just in terms of the honours system, Sadiq Khan getting that knighthood, what do you think of that? The number 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about New Year's Eve, please, because I know a lot of you are now getting ready for New Year's Eve celebrations. Well, very sadly, Edinburgh's Hogmanay fireworks have been cancelled because of concerns over multi-hazard weather. Organisers said high winds and inclement conditions have forced them to call off all outdoor events scheduled for today on the grounds of public safety. The city's famous street party and a disco party in a park have also been cancelled. The Met Office is warning snow, rain, wind could disrupt New Year's celebration across the United Kingdom. Also, I happen to know that London is also monitoring what is going on here. City Hall says it's monitoring the weather forecast ahead of tonight's New Year's Eve's display. Of course, that is a sold-out event. Gusts of wind are expected to reach 41 miles an hour in the run up to midnight. Joining me now, Claire Nazir, meteorologist. Good morning to you, Claire.
Good morning, David.
So, give us the bad news.
Well, as you say, there's many hazards out there through the last day of 2024, pretty much mirroring what's happened over the last 18 months or so. We've had so many storms, so much wet weather. Now, over the last 24 hours, Scotland's had a huge amount of rain, and there are flood warnings in force across many parts, and we have seen flooding. The winds are still very strong, particularly in the north. However, the band of rain currently across Northern Ireland and Scotland is slowly sinking southwards. So as people are stepping out through evening time, the wettest weather will be the northwest of England as well as Wales. It will sort of dry up across Northern Ireland, which is good news. And in fact, Edinburgh, the central belt, looks like it will be drier, but still rather windy. Still very windy across the far north of Scotland with some heavy rain turning to snow, the risk of ice later. And across central southern parts of England and Wales, including London, the winds will slowly pick up as we head through towards midnight.
So just in terms of that, of course, we've got a ticketed event here in London. It's a sold-out event. There are lots of concerns about reselling of those tickets. But just looking at the weather, what's the advice? I mean, I know City Hall organisers are looking at this. It's a massive event, of course. Fireworks have been laid out, and it's a very complicated, very organised operation. For those people who are planning to attend, I assume the advice is, at the moment, given the weather, to carry on as usual.
Well, I mean, the warning kicks in across London through the early hours of the morning into tomorrow, so around 1 o'clock in the morning. The warnings have now been reassessed and tweaked. I've just been on conference with the senior meteorologist at the Met Office. So they are now being issued. So it's worth checking the Met Office website wherever you are across the country. In regards to London, yes, it's going to be a windy night, and the winds will pick up around midnight into the early hours of the morning. And then we've got some very heavy squally rain moving in through into New Year's Day. So it is a watch this space. I can't tell the organisers what to do this evening, but certainly it will be a windy one, and the winds will get worse before they get better across London, central southern England into the first day of 2025.
I mean, it sounds from what you're saying is that we might just get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is going to be a windy night, but certainly we're not going to see the rain until tomorrow across these parts. So, you know, at the moment, it looks like it is going ahead, which I'm really thrilled about. And I know that London will be in touch with the Met Office for the latest information on the weather. But currently, the winds really become potent into the early hours of tomorrow morning.
And what are you doing for New Year?
I'm going to step out, but I live in Cheshire, David, where we'll see heavy rain and strong winds through this evening. So I'm going to step out to my neighbours.
Oh, that's very nice, very nice. Well, I wish you a very happy New Year. Thanks ever so much for that, Claire Nazir there, with the latest on the weather. So, as Claire said, do check with the Met Office. Have a look at all the information that's been given, particularly if you're trying to attend the celebrations here in London. I can see the weather at the moment is pretty gloomy, but obviously that wind picking up throughout this evening and into the early hours of this morning. Let's take a call now. Mark is on the line from Glasgow. Good morning.
Good morning, David.
What's on your mind this morning?
BBC and their licence fee and diversity, you name it.
Yes. This conversation I had earlier on about the BBC, where I was talking to Roger Bolton, the former BBC executive, he said we need public service broadcasting and therefore there has to be universality to it.
I agree with that entirely, but I'm of a certain age who, when I was at primary school, remember the days of music while you work and all the rest of it. We had BBC One.
Yes.
We had, I think, 3 BBC radio channels. That was your lot. BBC, we now have such a diversity of online, down the net, and other Freeview and so on. We don't need this massive thing. We do need the overseas service. We do need BBC One, maybe a news channel, and we need radios 1, 2, 3 and 4. We don't need 5 Live, 5 Sport and all the rest of it.
What about local radio?
Local radio, to be honest with you, most areas have local radio stations out with the BBC, and the problem is they struggle because the BBC runs these mini conglomerates in each sort of large town and city. It's a massive cost and it's unnecessary now because we have.
But you see, now I will counter that by saying that I think one of the problems is that because they've amalgamated those local radio stations into much bigger areas, or indeed the local news wherever you are. So, for example, take where I am in the east, we used to have a much smaller area, so every news story was pertinent to you. Now it's such a big area, I've no idea and no interest what's going on in Corby, for example, which is nowhere near where I live.
I agree, David. But being, I'm just recently retired, and I just don't see why we need to have all these. The radio channels aren't a major cost. The TV channels are, and then they got rid of BBC Three, and then they bought it back, and it's full of, frankly, a CR4P. It really is appalling. I don't watch it at all. It's junk.
Well, to be fair, they would say it's not aimed at you. They would say it's aimed at a youth audience, trying to attract them into the BBC in the same way that our generation has been attracted into the BBC.
But it doesn't work, does it? We all know, everyone, all the youngsters are streaming. Anyone under the age of 25, 30 is streaming. They're not watching BBC at all. So they're throwing loads of our licence fee money at something that's not required. There are lots and lots of channels. The BBC is what I call an essential national broadcaster. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be spiralling away and becoming some huge public sector conglomerate that's running out of control, that's furthering certain political and dare I say, sort of sexual views and so on and so on. Then that's not their job. Their job is to tell us what's going on. Their job is to let us. I've lost track of decent music. I never hear anything played from the 70s and 80s, apart from George Michael, that is, and Queen, on any BBC channel. Why? We ran the world at one point, but we never hear any of those super groups that used to be around. Why aren't they playing them? But it's the point is that it seems to be, it's a plaything for people who are playing at petty politics, ideologies and so on, and it is dangerously close to becoming just, well, something we accept, but in fact is the unacceptable.
What about if BBC News website went down? Would you miss that?
I never watch it. I have
the website.
I have at least, forgive me, Talk, GB News, Sky News, BBC News Channel. Why? Why would I?
OK, fair enough. Good to hear from you, Mark. Happy New Year. That's Mark in Glasgow. Keep your messages coming in about the BBC or indeed about Sadiq Khan, the knighthood, the honours system, whatever it is. Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Also, we're on Twitter at, well, no, it's not Twitter now, at talkTV. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more of this morning's top stories after this break. This is Morning Glory. Good morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is the final part of Morning Glory, 9:46, Tuesday, December the 31st. Getting in the mood for New Year's Eve later on. Actually, I'm going to be in bed because I'm doing Morning Glory tomorrow for New Year's Day, you lucky things. Good morning, David. This is Jeff. Keir Starmer has knighted Sadiq Khan for his continuing destruction of London, and then he himself can concentrate on destroying the rest of the country, knowing Khan will complete the task. Great show. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And now, earlier on, I was talking to Peter Bleksley, and we were talking about Sadiq Khan, and this is the big story here. The Prime Minister knights Khan in reward for failure. I was talking to Isabel Oakeshott about this earlier on, about the fact that we're seeing spiralling knife crime in the capital. The capital isn't what it was, the imposition of 20-mile-an-hour zones. Ulez, he calls those people who were against Ulez Tories. He called them all sorts of very unpleasant names indeed. Very unfitting behaviour, I would think. So earlier on, I was talking to Peter Bleksley, and this is what we said about Sadiq Khan.
And of course, he relies heavily on the block Brown vote in London. And they've elected him 3 times, astonishingly, ludicrously, foolishly, I would venture to suggest. He knows his audience. He knows how to get voted in. He knows exactly what to say because, of course, London has swathes of this city, not only the inner parts of it, but the suburbs, that are almost full exclusively of brown and black faces. That's how it is. That's a fact. That's not racist. There are areas that are predominantly, overwhelmingly.
And why do they vote for him?
Because he's a brown-faced man and he will criticise anything that is perceived to be right of centre, slightly right of centre, anything that kind of represents the man who drives a van for a living, needs to get into London to earn a shilling or 3, and is in any way, shape or form not basically part of the lunatic left.
I mean, it certainly seems that he panders to those minority groups. He knows, as you say, exactly where his vote is. It seems the vast majority of Londoners are ignored. And as you rightly say, he has been rewarded for failure. What does it say about the wider award system? Or I'm thinking about people like Emily Thornberry. You remember when she had a go at someone hanging out a St George's flag out of their house and essentially implying that was racist?
But there's just one thing I need to say before we move on to Thornberry, if I may.
Yeah.
When you say minority groups, in many parts of London, they are the overwhelmingly dominant group, and they are not minorities in any way, shape or form, and Khan knows that.
Oh, he certainly does.
Block votes, and those are who he appeals to, and that is largely why he's been elected, sadly, 3 times.
That was me and Peter Bleksley talking about Sadiq Khan and his knighthood a little earlier on this morning. Lots of you getting in touch. Lee in Hampshire. Good morning, Dr. David. As Khan gets a knighthood, I wouldn't be surprised if HS2 gets Travel Operator of the Year. Very good. Very funny. I like that. Great to see you today from a hospital bed. Golly, I hope you're all right. I hope you're on the mend as well. Happy New Year to you. Also, Sadiq Khan, those people who were against the Ulez zone, the expansion of Ulez, and I'll tell you why they were against it, because it was an imposition into their daily lives based and predicated on very dubious data. He called them all sorts of very unpleasant things. This is what he said.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group. Let's be frank. Let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right. Some are COVID deniers. Some are vaccine deniers, and some are Tories.
How being against Ulez makes you far right, I'm not quite sure, or being a COVID denier or a vaccine sceptic. What has that got to do with anything? Suze, good morning to you. Sue says, Khan calling Ulez objectors far right, vaccine deniers and Tories reminds me of Hamza Yusuf's white racist speech he made in Holyrood. Look what happened to Yusuf. So we can only hope that Khan will meet the same fate. Both men are obvious racists. Thanks very much for your message. Let's take a call now. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Good morning. You want to talk about Sadiq Khan?
Good morning, David. Happy New Year. You do a great job to all at Talk Radio. 2 points to make. First and foremost, the name Shir Maxim is the one that you should remember. A mother at the Notting Hill Carnival,
yes,
who was hacked to death in front of her 3-year-old child.
Yeah.
The Mayor of London is responsible for that, and he should have resigned straight away. And then you look at all the other parents out there who have lost children as a result of stabbings.
Yeah.
This is not a game, David. This is people's lives, and he's playing with them. And you've been very brave this morning going into that area of race in relation to him. If you look at that young girl in Iran who was beaten to death for not wearing a headscarf, why did the Mayor of London not have a month where no one in London was to wear a headscarf in support of her and women? He is divisive to the point where it's actually costing people lives. And I really genuinely, it's not the honour system. There's some great people out there who do great work, and they should be rewarded, and that's right. But when you've got something like this, it really sticks in the throat. It's not about me or you, because it's easy for us. Think of those people that didn't spend Christmas with their child. Think of that little child whose mummy's never coming back, who she saw die in front of her. And he's responsible for that. And it's not funny. And Starmer, this shows he's a North London lawyer. He talks at people. He doesn't take anything on board. He has no ability to understand. He just broadcasts, a bit like I'm doing with you. He broadcasts, nothing comes back. He, as my daughter said to me over something once, Khan and Starmer, they're dead inside.
It's a really interesting point, that, and I was just reflecting whilst you were broadcasting at me to this city. It is more divided than I can ever remember. You're right. He has been in charge where I've seen organisations or groups of people who are living very separate lives in the same city. And so that is a very interesting point you raise about whether you should have taken off headscarves as a mark of solidarity and respect. That's a very fascinating conversation, Andrew. Thanks very much, and I wish you a very happy New Year. Ian is in London. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David. David, let's take Khan's own words. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Right? That's what he said.
He did.
Khan is a racist as well. He's a racist the opposite way. He's a racist against white and especially Jews. He has never stopped all the marches. He has never stopped all the problem, and he's got his own little police force because he's got Rowley. He pulls Rowley's chain, and he does exactly what he wants him to do. But there is another thing which is slightly off this point. You had your guest on, Roger Bolton, before.
Yes. Yeah.
With the BBC. One of his words that came out, and you can play it back on the tape, he complimented the BBC on their talk about the Middle East.
He certainly did, and it was at that point, I should have picked him up on that, and you're right, he did, and I actually think it's been very biased.
That's right, because he never got that the BBC called Hamas. They never called them terrorists, which they actually are, right?
I think they said prescribed terrorist organisation as decreed by the UK government.
Yeah, but they only after outcry,
exactly.
After months and months and months. They also sort of get reports of where bombings are supposed to have been done by Israel that weren't all the time. They show reports that are completely wrong. But going back to Khan, he will wreck this thing, but it's very funny that both Starmer and Khan's original jobs, what were they? Getting terrorists off of law courts. because that was Starmer and Khan's original background, was getting people into this country that should have been thrown out.
So can I just ask you, just in terms of this honours, how much of this is Keir Starmer actually keeping his friends close, his enemies closer still? There's no doubt in my mind that Sadiq Khan wants that top job.
Totally. Khan always wants that job. And if you look at the sort of Muppets that are around Starmer at the moment, you can't see Rayner getting it. You couldn't see beggar Rachel Robber Thieves. You can't see any of the others. So the one they think, oh, yeah, because the inner city areas will all vote for Khan, but it will be the worst thing. And quite simply, it just shows you it's a joke. The whole thing has become a joke. And I've got to be truthful. I don't back reform, but I can, as I said to you yesterday, unless reform and the Tories get together, they've got no chance of getting this mob out.
Interesting, Ian. It won't happen, let me tell you. Happy New Year, Ian. Really good to talk to you as well. Alex Phillips, good morning. Happy New Year.
Well, there's a little gift that hasn't been unwrapped yet. Look at you.
Ooh, I don't know. Saucy. Yeah, well, I just put it on for the last bit because obviously I'm getting in the mood for New Year's celebration because obviously I'll be in bed at 6.
Yeah, no, like, well, we're both here tomorrow, aren't we?
We are, yeah.
My ideal New Year's Eve, actually. I don't like New Year's Eve.
No, so I think there's too much pressure on you. So everyone is there saying, I'm going to have an amazing time, and then obviously, invariably, you don't.
I just don't get the point of it. The date's changed. Woo.
Yeah, because we're looking forward to a new... Oh, what's wrong with you? We're looking forward to a new year of optimism and hope, and Keir Starmer not being there, and Sadiq Khan not being there.
Yeah, Sadiq Khan not being there.
Yeah.
Sadiq Khan is definitely still going to be
I know
there.
he
And he's
is,
going to be Sir Sadiq, isn't he?
What do you think?
What do you think I think?
I know what you think I think.
I love the fact that the left wing, for all of their scandals and peccadillos and destruction of the country, are joyfully rewarded by the establishment.
I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? But I wonder how much of it is to say, here's a gong, because I'm really nervous you're going to stab me in the back.
Well, the most mental one is Patricia Hewitt. Dame Patricia Hewitt now, of course, she was famous for wanting to lower the age of consent to 10 years old, legalise incest. She was on the MI5 watch list for being a communist sympathiser and, of course, was caught in the cash for access scandal where she was bragging about offering $3,000 a day to get people positions on government boards. Here you go, have a gong.
OK, so if you got a gong, would you turn it down?
No, I'm awesome. I deserve one. That's completely different. We should be getting gongs.
Well, I agree.
Arise, Sir David.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
The question is, which gong? I mean, would you... An MBE, an OBE?
One of those big ones they have in Japan and they play at the end of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, like at the beginning of the Rank Organisation films. Do you remember that? There was a big gong. There was a big man who banged a gong. Anyway, I'm too old. Do you not
I wouldn't mind
that?
a sort of dinner gong, actually.
A dinner gong?
Yeah, well, that'd be quite good whenever I'm cooking.
What about... you could have a British Empire medal, you could have an MBE, an OBE.
Oh, Empire. Empire sounds good.
Empire? You like that one?
I like a bit of Empire. What do you go for?
I quite fancy an OBE or the one that's only 67, the Companion of Honour, where you're basically with the Companion of Honour, you only put CH after your name. That gets you a dinner reservation, let me tell you, in any restaurant.
How do you know